Chapter 1333. Seeing that Big Red actually nodded, Lin Xiao could only say to it, "Okay, since you don't want to go, then we'll go first." Lin Xiao turned around and waved to the others, then flashed and flew forward. After Lin Xiao and the others disappeared in front of them, the big red cat sat on the bare top of the tree. Its huge body formed a big red lump on the tree. Lin Xiao led the others forward for less than a kilometer, and sure enough, they saw a dark river. The river was as black as ink, and the surface of the river was as calm as a black belt in front of them. The two sides of the river were dozens of meters wide, and if they wanted to cross it, they could only fly or swim. However, Lin Xiao felt that this dark river didn't reflect any light, so it shouldn't be simple. She stretched out her hand behind her and said to the others, "Don't get close." At the same time, she squinted her eyes to observe the river. When she squinted her eyes, she saw that the entire river had changed color. The originally black river had turned into a dark purple energy color, and the entire river was dark purple, purple to the point that it was black. Lin Xiao raised her head, and the energy in the river was thicker than the ones floating above her head. Therefore, this water couldn't be touched. Needless to say, humans, Yuan Tianqing would be the first to suffer. On the zombies' side, Lin Xiao also felt that the energy in the water made her feel a sense of danger. Because the energy in the water was too thick, even if it was an immortal zombie, touching a drop would cause its energy and flesh to corrode. Lin Xiao opened her eyes and looked at the river with a calm face and ordered the others behind her, "This water can't be touched. You guys move back a bit." Lu Qianni originally wanted to touch the water in the river, but after coming here, his zombie instincts sensed the danger in the river. Since they couldn't touch the water, they could only fly over. Lin Xiao could fly, but she had to first put the others into the space. But the big red cat also could fly, but it didn't want to go near the river. Why was it? Or was it afraid of the energy in the river? That wasn't possible. It also had this kind of energy in its body, so the energy in the river shouldn't be able to hurt it. Then why? Come here. Get ready to enter my space and wait for me to cross the river before you come out. Lin Xiao waved at the zombies and asked them to line up in front of him. Everyone immediately flashed in front of her and lined up in 2 rows. Lin Xiao threw out 2 long hemp ropes and gave one to each team. When everyone caught the ropes at the same time, they pulled hard. He brought them into the space and threw them in front of the small building. "Stay where you are and wait for orders." Lin Xiao only said one sentence before leaving in a flash. In the middle building next to the one they were in, Yuan Tianqing was sitting on a chair by the window and looking out. Suddenly hearing Lin Xiao's voice, he stood up and stretched his head to look outside. After Lin Xiao disappeared, he saw the 2 rows of zombies standing still, as well as Duan Wan and Li Zheng. "What's going on? Why did I throw all of you in here?" After resting, Yuan Tianqing's aura was much stronger than when he had just woken up. At least he still had the strength to speak, so he looked down at the team members from the window and asked. Everyone turned their heads at the same time and didn't show any surprised expressions when they saw him. This was because Lin Xiao had already told them about Yuan Tianqing waking up. "There's a river that we can't cross. Leader needs to cross it alone." Li Zheng, who was standing closest to Yuan Tianqing, answered his question. Yuan Tianqing smiled and said, "Thanks to Leader's space, this mission has saved us a lot of trouble. Only our base has this benefit. Other bases don't have it." Li Zheng also showed a funny expression. At this time, after Lin Xiao came out of the space, she stood a few meters away from the riverbank. She didn't rush to fly over the river, but squinted her eyes and began to observe the movement of the energy in the river. She always felt that there was something else in this river full of poisonous superpower. However, Lin Xiao stood on the riverbank and quietly observed for nearly 3 minutes, but she didn't see anything else in the river, nor did she find anything abnormal. After confirming that there was really nothing wrong, she jumped up and waved her hand to release a black fog under her feet to lift her up. When she rose to a height of 20 to 30 meters, she flew toward the river. As she stared at the situation in the river below, she suddenly felt a pressure pressing down on her head when she moved to the top of the river. Lin Xiao looked up and saw that the thick fog thousands of meters above her head had a dense number of whirlpools. The moment she raised her head, these whirlpools suddenly fell from the sky. Tornado-like cyclones suddenly descended onto the surface of the river, instantly stirring up the originally calm river into turbulent waves. Ooh, wah, la la. The tranquility of the water was immediately broken, and because these whirlpools immediately drilled into the river, Lin Xiao dodged in time to avoid the whirlpool closest to her, so she wasn't hit. But now, she was trapped in these countless whirlpools. Each whirlpool was only a few meters away, and because of the high-speed rotation, the surrounding aura had a strong suction force. It seemed that they wanted to suck Lin Xiao into these whirlpools. If she was sucked in, then she would be swept into the river. Although the situation was a bit dangerous, Lin Xiao now understood why the big red cat was unwilling to come close. If it was one or two whirlpools, it might not care, but with so many in front of it, it would be very troublesome to avoid them all. More importantly, the big cat probably didn't want to be swept into the water. While thinking about the reason why the big red cat was unwilling to come close, she used her hands to stabilize the black fog under her feet, because if she relaxed even a little, she might be sucked into the whirlpools. But the power of the black fog was much weaker than the suction force of the energy whirlpools. She waved her hand, and a flame integrated into the black fog under her feet. She turned into a black flame and floated in the air. Poisonous energy tornadoes were coming down from the sky in all directions. If she wanted to go over, she could only pass through the gaps of these whirlpools. But the idea was simple, but it wasn't so easy to do it. In this way, Lin Xiao had to control the stability of her ability while also contending against the suction force of these whirlpools. At the same time, she had to control her ability to move through the gaps. If she made a mistake, she would lose the balance of the suction force and be sucked into the whirlpools. Chapter 1334. While Lin Xiao was carefully exploring the underground space, the base on the surface had completely taken in the group of people brought by Dong Xinxin and his sister. In the past few days, all the necessary procedures had been completed, The original corpse hunting group established by Dong Xinxin and the others was called the March Corpse Hunting Group. People who didn't know what the two words March meant. Only Dong Xinxin and the others knew that March was actually only 3 months. 3 months after she was reborn. At the beginning, Dong Lijiao wanted to call it New Life, while Luo Yuanjuan's name was a bit silly. He wanted to call it Resurrection. Deng Xinfei's name was more down-to-earth and was called the Mysterious Corpse Hunting Group, because this was the evaluation given by others. Low-key, mysterious. Not only was he powerful, but he could also predict danger. Later on, Dong Xinxin bought it and named it March. Now the March Corpse Hunting Group was very famous in Sea City. Basically, everyone living in Sea City had heard of the existence of the March Corpse Hunting Group. But not many people had seen them because they were mysterious and low-key. As for the other corpse hunting group that came with Dong Xinxin and the others, Dong Xinxin and the others were not familiar with them. After all, they only knew the leaders and managers. Dong Xinxin and the others also told Lin Feng that they couldn't guarantee that among the more than 10,000 people they brought, there wouldn't be people who would fish in troubled waters. After all, there were a lot of people, and they wouldn't check their details and recent movements one by one. Lin Feng expressed his understanding and didn't say anything about it. It was just that his trust in those people was still very low, and he still had basic vigilance. This time, for the mission of escorting supplies to Sea City, do the people from base number 2 need to enter Sea City together? Chen Yuding took the list of supplies to be sent to Sea City and asked Lin Feng this question. Because the medicine that Lung Xiantong and Shui Mingjun had made was very effective. At least the detectors in Sea City didn't have any reaction to the zombies who had taken the medicine, so they could completely act as normal soldiers and escort the supplies into Sea City. Who was in charge of the delivery this time? Lin Feng was looking at the information of the new residents who had just joined the base. When he saw Chen Yuding come in, He looked up at him and pointed to his chair. This time, it's the second base's first regiments, Jing Yin and Yin Xiao, who are in charge together. Our representative here is Du Yuanxing. Chen Yuding sat down and replied. Because they were escorting important rations and fresh food, they had to increase their security. In order to be absolutely safe, they needed at least 1 or 2 rank 1 Beast Kings and a platoon of zombies to secretly escort them. Lin Feng thought about it and said, if Jing Yin and Yin Xiao want to go in, they can. But the other soldiers don't need to go in. This is because the zombie legion below level 5 still has the characteristics of zombies on their faces and hands. It was too risky to go in. Even if the equipment couldn't detect anything, the soldiers of Sea City might be able to see something with their naked eyes. As for Jing Yin and Yin Xiao, other than the whites of their eyes that had not recovered, they were basically no different from humans. As long as one was wearing sunglasses or contact lenses, the chances of being discovered were very small, almost negligible. Just the 2 of them? That's good. It's time to let them enter Sea City to take a look. Chen Yuding nodded, then looked at the stack of documents on the table and asked curiously, there are so many people coming in this time. Will there really be no problems? Lin Feng flipped through the documents and said, there will definitely be problems, so we still have a lot of preventive work to do. We have to take precautions in advance so that we can deal with it in time. Lin Feng had already deployed a large number of city guards in the first base to keep an eye on every corner of the base. It was just that the number of city guards in the first base was too small, not enough at all. Although they were recruiting, because there were so many people now, the people were also mixed. So for the sake of the base's safety, the recruitment requirements were raised a lot, but there were still very few people who met the requirements. Also, they had to test these people's loyalty and character. At the very least, those who had been in the base for more than 3 months would not be able to apply to join the city guards. 3 months was just to meet the requirements. Whether they could be approved or not would have to wait for another 3 months. These 3 months would be spent on vetting. If there were no problems, once the vetting period was up, he would be directly appointed as a city guard soldier in the base. Especially now that they were in a dangerous situation with Huaxia, they could not let their guard down at all. Thinking of this problem, Chen Yuding also sighed. The main thing is that there are still too few survivors in our base, and the army is not enough. Now there are more people, but we can't recruit a large number of people at once. Should we specially recruit the people from the March Corps hunters into the army? As he said this, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration, and his eyes lit up as he looked at Lin Feng. Hearing this, Lin Feng stopped what he was doing and raised his head to look at him. Specially recruit? But there are indeed many people in the March Corps hunters. If we can persuade them to join the army, it would not be bad. As he said this, Lin Feng revealed a pondering expression. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it could be carried out. Although Chen Yuding did not know why the March Corps hunters would suddenly be brought back to the base by Lin Wenwen, Lin Feng himself knew the reason. Just the leaders of this Corps hunter group were willing to wait for Lin Wenwen for 7 years, not to mention what kind of thoughts they had. Let's not talk about what kind of thoughts they had, but on the bright side, the character and principles of this group were good. At least, even Chen Yuding had stayed in Haiqing for so long, and he had not heard any bad rumors about this group. This showed that their style of doing things was relatively righteous. Even Wu Changyue wanted to recruit them into the Haiqing army, which meant that the strength of this group was not weak. If they're really willing to join our army, maybe they will make Wu Qingyue very angry. Lin Feng suddenly thought of Wu Qingyue's reaction, and he did not know if there would be a crack in that guy's smile. Chen Yuding smiled and said, what else can he say? With our leader here, we'll just send him off with a sentence of death. But what are the conditions for special recruitment? Have you thought of it? Just a guarantor. If they can get the recommendation of the first and second batch of survivors in our base, or the recommendation of the leaders of their group, they can meet the conditions to join our base's army. I still need to find the Dong siblings to discuss this matter, Lin Feng said after thinking about it. If they wanted to recruit them, but the other party was not willing, then it would be awkward. At that time, they might even send him a cold song. Chapter 1335. Chen Yuding looked at him in surprise. Those people in charge? You really trust them. Let's not talk about Dong Xin, who was small, but had an extraordinary position. Lin Feng shouldn't know the other three people well. Lin Feng nodded and said, if it's them who recommended, of course I'll agree. For the sake of Wen, I believe they won't recommend bad people to us. Chen Yuding saw that he was so sure and couldn't help but ask him, what did Miss Wen do to them? Or did she say something? Lin Feng only glanced at him with a smile and said, maybe Wen helped them during a very important period. The two talked for a while, and Chen Yuding quickly left the office to deal with other things. Lin Feng took out a pen and paper to write down Chen Yuding's idea. After he finished dealing with the things here, he would immediately start to deal with this matter. However, Chen Yuding didn't leave for long and hurriedly ran back. Seeing Chen Yuding come back in less than half an hour, Lin Feng looked at him with some doubt. What's wrong? And it's still about the matter of escorting the supplies. I also just got the news. This time we have to change the person in charge. Chen Yuding also slightly frowned and walked in. Lin Feng asked him, you mean Du Yuanqing needs to be replaced? Why? Chen Yuding said, his ability suddenly exploded just now. He's probably about to advance. I heard him say yesterday that he might be about to break through soon. I didn't think he would suddenly come today. I thought he was talking about within the next 10 days to half a month. Lin Feng's eyes stared blankly. Then he revealed a slightly happy expression. Oh, that guy is finally about to advance? So it's like this. Then there's no other way. We should indeed change people. How is his current situation? Have you sent him to Lin Hao? Chen Yuding nodded. I've already sent him. The situation doesn't seem to be abnormal, but with Lin Hao there shouldn't be any big problems. Now, we just want to discuss who to replace. Although there were a lot of level 5 and level 6 zombies in the base, there were very few humans. Li Zheng, Duan Wan, and Long Qingying followed Lin Xiao out, leaving Du Yuanqing, Lin Hao, Lin Wenwen, Cheng Wangxue, Little A, and a few others in the base. Little A, also known as Qian Xiaoai, was Lin Feng's intelligence team leader, so he was not by his side now. Lin Hao was from a medical center, so it was impossible for him to go on such a mission, so there were only 2 women left. Lin Wenwen had just returned, and she wasn't a combat type. Hence, the only candidate left was Lin Feng's own wife. Cheng Wangxue was in the physical department, and her own strength was not weak. If she hadn't followed him, she would have had a daughter. She wouldn't just stay in the base to deal with the base's internal affairs. Little A isn't here, so it's impossible for Lin Hao to go. Wang Shui, on the other hand, was very suitable. She had a physical ability, but Lin Feng quickly filtered through a circle of people in his mind. These were the only people he absolutely trusted. The other level 5 ability users had just entered the base, such as Qin Yu and Mo Chi-Chi and the others. They were not qualified to take on this kind of confidential mission related to resources. But what? Chen Yuding asked in confusion when he saw his hesitant expression. Wang Shui can't go out in the near future, so she can't take on this mission. Lin Feng thought about it and explained with some difficulty. This was because he had heard Lin Wenwan say before that he had to focus on his wife and child during this period of time. So at this time, although he felt that Cheng Wangxue was very suitable for this mission, he suddenly remembered Lin Wenwen's words. He felt that if Cheng Wangxue went this time, she would be in danger, so he subconsciously said this. If it wasn't for Lin Wenwen's reminder, Lin Feng might have directly let Cheng Wangxue carry out this mission. But now, on one side was his wife, and on the other side was the base's secret. He couldn't relax on either side, especially since he already knew that something bad would happen to his wife in the near future. Seeing Lin Feng's conflicted expression, Chen Yuding glanced at him and lowered his head to think. After thinking about it, he made a decision. Why don't you let me go? Anyway, I'll be back in 2 days. I'll have to trouble you to take care of the small matters in the base for the next 2 days. If it really couldn't be done, then he would go. He had a 6th level ability. He was definitely qualified in terms of strength. It was just that his own position had a lot of things to do. Although it was divided between Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing, now that Yuan Tianqing wasn't here, he had to take over a lot of things. When Lin Feng heard this, he was stunned for a moment. Then, a thoughtful expression appeared on his face, and he nodded. You can go. Then I'll work a little harder and work overtime. Seeing that Lin Feng agreed, Chen Yuding immediately made a decision. Okay, then I'll ask Xinjin to bring you the documents that need to be dealt with in the next 2 days. She can also help. If you need her to do anything, you can ask her to do it. Because Shun Yuzhin's level was low, Lin Xiao kept her in the base. When she had nothing to do, she often ran over to help Chen Yuding deal with some small matters. In the afternoon, Chen Yuding escorted the supplies out of the base and set off for Haicheng. At this time, in the Huaxia base, Wei Haichao happened to play a hidden trump card in Haicheng. In a remote house in the outer district of Haicheng base, 2 men were secretly meeting here. One of the men exclaimed in surprise, "What? You want to sneak into that team and then sneak into the base? That's impossible. It's too difficult." "Why not? It depends on your strength. As long as you're willing to do it, there will always be a way to do it. You can find a chance to sneak under their car or hide in the recycled equipment. You can even pretend to be one of them. Let's see if you have the guts." The other man said calmly, "Pretend to be one of them? You want me to go straight to my death? Do you think I'm blind?" The man who spoke first snorted coldly. The other man shrugged and said indifferently, "I'm just giving an example. You figure out how to do it yourself. I believe you can do it. Think about it. If this mission succeeds, you can directly get an official position in Huaxia. How great is that? You won't have to follow those zombie hunting groups all day in Haicheng to kill zombies." Chapter 1336. 2 men were secretly plotting to sneak into Universal Base to escort the supplies. One of them expressed that it would be difficult to succeed on his own. "However, I definitely won't succeed if I go alone. Although Universal Base isn't large, they will definitely increase their security for such a secret escort mission. If there's no sudden chaos, I don't think I'll be able to sneak in even if I follow them all the way to Universal Base. Furthermore, if I fail this time, it will be even more difficult for you to send people in next time." The first man voiced out his judgment. If he was discovered, then the other side would definitely be more vigilant the next time, and his chances would be even lower. Therefore, he had to either have an absolute guarantee of success or not make a move at all. Furthermore, since the various bases had obtained potions that could defend against zombies, they were rarely attacked by zombies. The mutant plants along the way from Haicheng to Universal Base had also been cleared. Therefore, it would be impossible for the team to encounter any sudden incidents, unless it was man-made. Furthermore, according to the information I've gathered in Haicheng, Haicheng is also very concerned about the supplies that Universal Base is sending over. After all, it's all fresh food, and the value of it is very high. The man added. The other man felt that what he said made sense, and thought about it silently. After a while, he said, "However, after they've finished sending the supplies, their vigilance should be lower. How about this? I'll bring some people to pretend to be bandits to intercept them, and you can find a chance to sneak in. That should be fine, right?" In other words, they would bring people to rob the other side's team and divert the other side's attention to the bandits. At this time, he could definitely find a chance to sneak in, and even if he couldn't find a chance, he could create one himself. The first man nodded, and if you're willing to bring people to help, then my chances of success will definitely increase. The second man said, "We can't wait any longer. Our leader has been preparing to deal with Haicheng. However, in order to prevent any accidents from happening, we need to quickly get to the bottom of this Universal Base. We can't let them become a chance for Haicheng to rise again." The first man was somewhat puzzled. Since we're not afraid of such a big base like Haicheng, why worry about this small base? Even if they have some ability, it shouldn't be enough to let Haicheng rise again, right? In his eyes, Universal Base was a small base with less than 10,000 people. Huaxia, on the other hand, had more than 1 million survivors, and the army alone had hundreds of thousands of people. Among all the bases in the country, only Haicheng had the strength to contend with Huaxia. Why would he be afraid that this tiny base with less than 10,000 people would be able to do anything? Therefore, when he saw that Huaxia seemed to attach great importance to this mini base, he was a little puzzled. Even with absolute strength, he still thought of ways to investigate the situation of this base. Wasn't he making a mountain out of a molehill? Although I think so too, you can't underestimate this base. If you're too careless, you'll suffer. Another man looked at him with some disdain. If it wasn't for the fact that Sikong-chun had sent people to that small base several times and were completely annihilated, Sikong-chun wouldn't have paid so much attention to this place. After all, what kind of power was the person they sent not long ago? Under normal circumstances, hundreds of level 5 and level 6 paranormals, coupled with the weapons they carried, could completely destroy this base. In the end, they were still cleaned up by the enemy without leaving any clues. If Sikong-chun didn't pay attention to this small base under such abnormal circumstances, then he wouldn't have the ability to be the leader of Huaxia. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent the undercover agents from Haicheng. In any case, don't worry about anything else. Just follow my orders, he said to the person after thinking for a while. I understand. The other person nodded in agreement. That night, Chen Yuding brought 200 armed soldiers and transported a few tons of fresh fruits and vegetables towards Haicheng. Apart from him and the 200 human soldiers, there was also Jing Yin and Yin Xiao, each leading an elite zombie squad to escort them. Really? Is this thing really useful? Yin Xiao looked at the medicine distributed to her left and right with some suspicion. After all, if they drank this medicine and sneaked into Haicheng, what would they do if they were discovered by the virus detectors? This was their base's secret. If it were to spread in Haicheng, then it would be disastrous. Jing Yin said very calmly, Don't worry. The people who are contacting us are all special forces in Haicheng. Even if they find out, Xiao Yunlong won't let them spread it. And we're going through a side door. There won't be any idle people waiting there. More importantly, Lung Xintong has done enough experiments on this medicine. If he says there's no problem, then there shouldn't be a problem. They were using his own wife as an experiment. What problem could there be? Yin Xiao sighed. She was still a little nervous. I hope there really won't be any problem. The two of them were also mixed in with Chen Yuding's escort team, but their soldiers were hidden in the dark and followed the team. In order to keep the mission hidden, Haicheng would almost always set off to Haicheng at night, and by the time they reached Haicheng, it was already 2 or 3 in the morning. At the same time, for the sake of concealment, Haicheng opened up small doors for them to pass through. Therefore, it was very difficult to obtain this kind of information if they didn't deliberately inquire from various sources. In the middle of the night, Haicheng's team smoothly arrived at the side door of Haicheng, as usual. The soldiers of Haicheng were already waiting outside the side door, and this time it was not Xiao Yunlong's deputy, Huang Ming, who came to contact them, but Xiao Liqing. After hearing the sound of the car, Xiao Liqing waved to his subordinates, and the soldiers opened the door. However, Haicheng's car did not drive directly in, but stopped at the door. Huh? Why is it your turn? Chen Yuding was slightly surprised when he saw that it was Xiao Liqing. Well, it's fine if they change people here, but why did Haicheng also change people? Xiao Liqing stood next to their car and watched Chen Yuding stretch his head out of the window and look at him curiously. He said, Huang Ming suddenly began to advance his ability today, so it's my turn. Chen Yuding's expression was stunned after hearing this, and he looked at him silently for 3 seconds before saying, Did the two of them make an appointment? Advancing on the same day as a team? Xiao Liqing. Cough, it's a coincidence. Chapter 1337. Huang Ming and Du Yuanxing were originally 5th rank ice elemental. Now, both of them had entered a state of advancement at the same time. It was just unknown who would succeed first. But it looks like our old Du will succeed first. Chen Yuding got out of the car and waved to the driver. He told them to drive the car through the detection tunnel first. Then the two of them stood to the side and watched the car slowly drive and while chatting quietly. Xiao Liqing heard his words and subconsciously asked, Why? Because we have the medicine. Chen Yuding smiled at him and said, Oh, that's right. I almost forgot that your leader seems to have this kind of medicine. He used it on Xiao Lingling before. Xiao Liqing remembered this point. When Xiao Lingling's ability was awakened, the energy went berserk. It was their leader who helped solve this problem. Come. There's something I need your help to verify. At this moment, Chen Yuding suddenly reached out and grabbed Xiao Liqing by the neck. He brought him to a side where there were fewer people and said, "In a moment, I'll let two special girls pass through this detector. If anything happens, I'll have to trouble you to cover for them." "What special girls?" Xiao Liqing looked at him in confusion. Suddenly, he thought of something and immediately asked, "Wait a minute, could it be someone from your second base?" Chen Yuding nodded at him. Xiao Liqing looked at him in confusion. "Why? If it was someone from your second base, it would definitely sound. Wasn't it obvious that they would be detected? No matter how much they recovered on the outside, the flesh and blood in their bodies had already deteriorated. It was equivalent to having a virus all over their bodies. Not to mention how loud the detector would go, it would probably go off before he even stepped into it." Chen Yuding looked around and saw that no one else was paying attention to their conversation. Only then did he open his mouth and say, "According to the situation we prepared earlier, it shouldn't go off. I'm just afraid that there might be an accident, so I need to rely on your reaction to create a diversion." When Xiao Liqing heard this, he frowned slightly and stared at him for a while. Then he asked, "What the hell? You're saying that you've prepared for it? That it can even avoid the detector?" Chen Yuding smiled and nodded at him. "Yes, that's indeed what we've been doing, and it's been successful. But don't worry, we won't let them use this potion casually, so it won't be leaked to the outside world." It meant that they would only distribute it to the person in charge of the mission during a special mission, so these drugs would not be leaked to the outside world and would not be taken by the wild zombies outside. Therefore, it would not pose a threat to the human base. Xiao Liqing looked at him in surprise. "You even made this kind of thing? You're pretty fast." Thinking from the perspective of the universal life base, one could also understand the effects of this drug on the army in their second base. Chen Yuding patted him on the shoulder and said, "You should know the two who are going in now, Jing Yin and Yin Xiao. Keep an eye on him." After that, he walked back and gestured to the car behind him. The supplies they were transporting were delivered in 5 military trucks. All 5 trucks were filled with fresh fruits, vegetables, and all kinds of food ingredients. After Lu Jun's careful management, there were also a large number of zombie soldiers who were cultivating and managing the land. The land that had been soaked in Lin Xiao's lake water was very rich in crops. Moreover, the harvested output completely exceeded the consumption of all the survivors in the base, so the surplus was sent to Haicheng. This caused one of the leaders of Haicheng, Zhou Shihui, to start thinking about taking over the base. But this had to be done by Wu Qingyue, and he still had to get this guy to quickly marry her. That way, it would be easier to talk to them if they became a family. After seeing Chen Yuding's signal, Jing Yin and Yin Xiao both got out of the car. The two of them were still wearing the camouflage combat uniform and had their hair tied up and wore sunglasses. Xiao Liqing, who often interacted with them, was already used to these zombies wearing sunglasses at night, but for the Haicheng soldiers guarding the gate, they looked at the two women a few more times. But they only looked at them a few more times and then didn't pay much attention to them. Wearing sunglasses in the middle of the night, although it was quite strange. But if the sunglasses were special equipment, then it was normal. It seemed like the kind with night vision. The two girls walked in front of Xiao Liqing and Chen Yuding and greeted Xiao Liqing. "How is it? Can we go in?" Chen Yuding turned his head and glanced at Xiao Liqing, then turned his head to the two girls and nodded. Jing Yin and Yin Xiao immediately turned and walked towards the gate, and behind them, Xiao Liqing and Chen Yuding both stared at them. They watched the two of them enter the pedestrian detection channel, and then the detector didn't make any noise. After watching the two of them successfully enter, they waited for 3 seconds, and there was still no movement. Chen Yuding and Xiao Liqing both inexplicably let out a sigh of relief. "Okay, now we know the answer, no problem. You seem to be a little nervous. Didn't you guys prepare?" Xiao Liqing turned around and said to Chen Yuding. Chen Yuding sighed helplessly, but said in a relaxed mood, "It's the same as a maneuver and an assessment. Even if you pass the maneuver accurately, you will pass it anyway. Even if you pass the drill correctly, when it comes to the real exam, won't you still be nervous?" Xiao Liqing shrugged. "Well, that's true. The two zombie beauties managed to sneak into the naval base without the knowledge of the human soldiers of Haicheng. After the supply trucks passed through the detection channel, Xiao Liqing and Qin Yuding also went in and closed the door. After entering, Yin Xiao said in a low voice with some excitement, "I used to hide in the leader's space to come in. I didn't expect to be able to come in through the main gate. This feels so good." Jing Yin leaned back on the back of the car seat and glanced at her calmly. She said expressionlessly, "What's there to be excited about? If you want to come in, there are ways. It just feels different." Yin Xiao looked at her and said with a smile. After their convoy entered, on the roof of a building a kilometer away from the side door, two figures were hiding in the dark with night vision binoculars. But at this time, the person holding the binoculars put down the binoculars and said, "They're here, but they only stay for 1 or 2 days each time, then immediately leave at night." And this time, the person in charge has changed from a level 5 psychic to a level 6. I don't know if they have a premonition of something. Chapter 1338. When Qin Yuding escorted the supplies to Sea City, the next day, Lin Feng found Dong Lijia and talked to him about recruiting members from their corpse hunting team. "Only recommending members from our team? Do you want the other members who came with us?" Dong Lijia sat opposite Lin Feng and asked him. "Yes, of course we want them. However, if it's not someone from your own team, but someone from another team, we'll lower our conditions a little." Lin Feng, who was sitting with his back straight like a soldier, nodded. His expressionless face was not surprised by Dong Lijia's question. Since they were here to poach people from their corpse hunting team, they naturally had to give them some compensation. So if Dong Lijia and the others were willing to recommend their members to them, they would naturally give corresponding compensation to their corpse hunting team. For example, the base's contribution points, zombie cores, energy cores, resources, etc. would be distributed to them according to the number of members. But if they recommended members from other teams, then the base's compensation to this corpse hunting team would naturally be lower. Oh, this is a difference in treatment. Dong Lijia listened and looked at Lin Feng with a smile. He couldn't help but ask him again, "Then will their treatment be worse than our members?" Lin Feng shook his head. "No, we will give everyone the same treatment. It's just that the compensation for your team will be different. After all, the members of March were trained by you. We're basically poaching people from March. And the other corpse hunting teams were not trained by you. You didn't invest any resources in them, right? So you don't need us to compensate you, right? Am I right?" "That's true. All right, I'll help you with this matter. Let's see if anyone from our team is willing to join your base's army. After all, it will be a huge consumption to support so many people." Dong Lijia smiled and nodded. And Lin Feng only planned to poach people from their team. He didn't intend to recruit the entire team. Because he didn't know if the other party had this intention, he still had to greet them. Of course, if the core members of your team are also willing to join, we will also welcome them. He looked at Dong Lijia and cautiously threw out an olive branch. Dong Lijia didn't take it directly. Instead, he continued to smile at him and nodded. "Well, we don't have this intention yet. If we change our mind in the future, we will consider joining your base's army. But I don't know if it will still be counted by then." Lin Feng nodded. "Of course it will. As long as you are willing, you can join any time." "Thank you." Dong Lijia smiled and nodded. Lin Feng placed the contract on his desk and said, "The contract is all here. You can discuss it with the others before making a decision." Lin Feng, Dong Lijia. As he spoke, he stood up, and Dong Lijia stood up as well. After sending him out, Dong Lijia sat back down and took the document he had given him. He opened it and looked at it carefully. After Feng finished reading the document, Lin Feng said, "Lin Feng is Dong, Dong will. Ming Feng, Dong Feng, and Dong will. After reading the document, Dong Xin said, "If we join the army, we will lose our initiative and be restrained. I don't think it's necessary. Anyway, we have already joined this base. If the base is in danger, we will face it together. So, it's not suitable for us to join their army." Her own regiment had its own organization, and if she joined the base's army, she would have no choice. If they joined the base's army, it would be impossible for them to maintain their own system. It would disrupt their original core. Also, if they joined the army, they would be restrained by military rules and regulations. That would make them lose a lot of freedom. However, there are also benefits if he joined the army. He would receive compensation from the base, and so on. They would have their own resources, and they could rely on their own strength to obtain other resources. They didn't need to join the army to survive. I agree. Deng Xinfei didn't say anything. He looked at Dong Xinxin and nodded in agreement. Me too. Luo Yuanjun nodded. I say, can't the two of you have your own opinions? Don't just follow Xinxin's words, okay? Dong Lijiao looked at the two men in disgust. TSK, it has nothing to do with me, right? Don't blame it on me. Dong Xinxin rolled his eyes at him, crossed his arms, and leaned back on the sofa. Since we don't want to join, let's send some people to them. After all, the number of soldiers in this base is pitifully small. Dong Lijiao thought about it and made a decision. The first benefit of joining the army was contribution points. Every month, they could get energy cores, weapons, meal tickets, dormitories, and so on. For the people at the bottom of the corpse hunters group, they might only be attracted by contribution points and energy cores. After all, although the missions in the corpse hunters group were dangerous, they didn't have to worry about food and clothing. But contribution points and energy cores were more difficult. Energy cores were easy to get, as they could be obtained by making contributions in the corpse hunters group. But contribution points could only be obtained by doing work for the base. Contribution points could be exchanged for all other resources. This was the same in any base. So as long as Dong Lijiao spread the news to his group, most people would definitely be tempted. What do you think? Dong Lijiao looked at the three of them. Dong Xinxin shrugged. I don't have an opinion. Deng Xinfei shook his head silently. No. Luo Yuanjun also shook his head. Dong Lijiao said, all right, I'll send someone to send the news. Let's see when Lin Feng has time to come for the signing meeting. Jing Yin and Yin Xiao waited for Chun Yuting to hand over the supplies in Haicheng. Then they walked around the base for 2 days. On the second night, they gathered together and returned home. Not long after leaving Haicheng, when they were about 30 to 40 kilometers away, Jing Yin and Yin Zhao's expressions suddenly turned cold. The two of them looked at each other and then ordered the driver, keep driving. Then the two zombies opened the door while the car was still moving. One jumped onto the roof of Chun Yuting's car, and the other disappeared in a flash. Yin Xiao knelt on the roof of the car, bent over, and patted Chun Yuting's window. Chun Yuting lowered the window and looked up. What's the situation? There are people blocking the road in front, about 100 people. Yin Xiao sniffed the air in front and reported to Chun Yuting. Chun Yuting nodded, got it. Then he took out his communicator and said to the team, everyone on alert, prepare for battle. Chapter 1339. Hearing Chun Yuting's order, everyone immediately pulled out their guns and were on full alert. The speed of the convoy did not change, but continued to move forward at the same speed. At this time, Jing Yin had already led a group of zombies forward. Following the scent of living people, she made a hand signal to her subordinates to conceal their presence. Then when they were a few hundred meters away from the other party, she stopped, stood on a high vantage point, and looked around, then turned around and went around to the side. However, the speed at which she led her people was very fast. In the dark of the night, because the night wind was already very loud, the sound of Jing Yan's people moving quickly could not be heard at all. When they were about 200 meters away from the other party, Jing Yan raised her hand and made another hand signal to her subordinates. Following that, the team members behind her quietly spread out in all directions, forming a large semicircle around the unknown group of people. Because they were more than 200 meters away from the other party, they temporarily surrounded half of the direction. At this time, Jing Yan's figure flashed and went toward the person in front of her. When she was less than 10 meters away from the other party, she stopped. She tried to conceal her presence as much as possible, then carefully stared at the direction of the other party. Although the other party was also concealing their presence, it was not to an extreme extent. Maybe it was because they were still a short distance away from Chun Yuting's team, so they did not enter a state of battle preparation. Therefore, their presence was somewhat leaked. Jing Yin quietly approached them. Based on their aura, she slowly determined that the strongest ability user in the group was only a rank 6. There were about 10 level 5 metahumans. The rest were level 3 or 4 metahumans, and some ordinary people. These people appeared in the middle of the night on the road that they had to pass on their way back to the base, and they were even hiding in the shadows on both sides while concealing their presence. It was obvious that they wanted to ambush them. Jing Yin did not directly go near them, but instead found a place 20 to 30 meters away to hide, then stretched her ears and began to listen for their movements. As long as the direction of the wind did not change, the wind would still carry some sound. Moreover, Zombie's hearing was already very strong, and as she rose to level 6, her hearing naturally became stronger. She first wanted to find out who this group of people were, and she guessed that they were most likely from China. Jing Yin thought to herself as she closed her eyes and stretched her ears to listen to their conversation. Reporting, the target is 2 kilometers away. Continue to keep an eye on them. Come back and report as soon as you are within 1 kilometer. Yes. After a gust of wind blew past, the intermittent voice came again. Are you sure you can deal with Qin Yuding? He's a rank 6 arcanist. Even though he's an earth type, his attack power isn't weak. Don't worry. I'm just luring him away, not fighting to the death. I'm just messing up their plan. I think if you want to pretend to be a robber, you should at least pretend to be one. You should know the style of those robbers. I got it. Jing Yin didn't get a complete understanding of their conversation, but she was able to glean a lot of information from their conversation. They were actually pretending to be bandits to intercept them, but it didn't seem like they were going to annihilate them all. What did that mean? From the amount of information that Jing Yin heard, she felt that this was probably a trap. There might be other tricks up his sleeves. Qin Yuding's team was getting closer and closer. When they were within 1 kilometer, Jing Yin suddenly flashed away. Then, she suddenly stopped a few hundred meters away and hid in the dark, waiting quietly. After a few seconds, 2 figures were moving quickly and quietly towards her. Their purpose was obviously to go back and report to the people who were ambushing them. It was just that one of them was a Logia and the other was a wind type. Both of them were only rank 4. Jing Yin looked for the trajectory of the 2 people and found the highest point to hide on. The moment the 2 people rushed past her position, she suddenly swooped down from the top and pounced on one of them at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, her fingers pierced through the other person's skull. She pierced through the enemy's skull, and before she landed on the ground, she disappeared again in a flash. Then, before the second enemy realized that his comrade had been killed, she quickly appeared behind him in a flash. Puff Dash, the second person, heard a strange sound from his companion. He couldn't help but turn his head to look, but he didn't see his companion following them. Just as he was in a daze and wanted to look for his companion again, a figure had quietly flashed behind him. A zombie's claw instantly pierced through his heart. Ugh Dash, the male wind-type ability user, stood stiffly on the tree. His eyes were wide open as he looked down in disbelief at the human claw that had pierced through his chest. Then, he slowly turned his head and looked behind him, only to see a pair of dark zombie eyes with 2 red beads. Then, before he could recover, he felt a sharp pain on his head. Then, his vision blurred, and his consciousness dissipated. Kacha Dash. Jing Yin ripped off his skull and took out the energy core. He swiftly collected all the weapons and equipment he had on him. Then, he went to collect the equipment of the first player he had just killed. After doing this, she immediately turned around and quickly flashed towards Qin Yuding's team. After seeing Jing Yin appear, Qin Yuding's team immediately stopped. He asked her, "How is it? Who are they?" Jing Yin had already put on her sunglasses again. She stood in front of him and said expressionlessly, 1 kilometer ahead, there are people on both sides of the road. It's the Chinese again. But this time, their goal isn't to wipe us out. Instead, they want to pretend to be robbers and create chaos. Then, they will send people to our team to hide. That way, they can smoothly sneak into our base. Qin Yuding had a thoughtful expression when he heard this. Looks like Sikong Chun is now using infiltration to continue sneaking into our base to find out more about us. Then he asked, "How strong are these people?" Jing Yin said, "There are 135 of them. 1 level 6 ability user, 10 level 5 ability users. There are 50 to 60 normal people, and the rest are level 3 or 4 ability users. There are plenty of weapons, and they are all new ones. Look, as she said this, she took out the weapons she had just collected and placed them on the hood of the car for him to see. These weapons are the new Chinese energy guns, and their attack power is several times greater than a normal handgun. Also, the range is much longer. Chapter 1340. Just a rank 6 metahuman? At least he was in the top 100 last time. Are you trying to mess with us this time? Chen Yuding could not help but laugh when he heard Jing Yan's description of the opponent's strength. At this time, Yin Xiao jumped down from the side and said, he probably doesn't want to fight us head on. Whether it was hard or soft, he always failed. Jing Yan looked at Chen Yuding and asked, what do you plan to do? Chen Yuding immediately said, the two of you will lead a team to ambush them from both sides. Since they want to pretend to be robbers, then pretend to be a zombie horde and play with them. I will continue to advance along the original route. The two of you will first gather the nearby wild zombies. Then, when they're ready to move, strike first. Remember what our standards are. Don't let a single one escape. I know. Yin Xiao smiled and tilted her head. Jing Yan nodded and immediately said, then let's move now. After saying that, she immediately disappeared in a flash, and Yin Xiao quickly left with her. Chen Yuding went back into the car, and the convoy continued to move forward. Because the two scouts that were watching the base were killed by Jing Yan, the Chinese people that were lying in ambush did not know where Chen Yuding and the others were. However, while the level 6 Arcanist was waiting for news, he was also estimating the approximate speed of Chen Yuding and the others at the same time, estimating their current location. But because he was more focused on waiting for the scouts to come back and report more accurately, he did not pay much attention to the rough prediction in his heart and missed some things. When he felt that the person who should have reported back had not returned, he became suspicious. Suddenly, he heard the roar of zombies coming from both sides. Roar! The two zombies' roars were loud and long, as if they were transmitting something. The attention of the Chinese people was attracted because the two roars were too close to them. What's going on? Are they intermediate zombies or advanced zombies? I don't know, but something is wrong. How can there be two of them at the same time? And this sound seems to be gathering zombies. Something is wrong. There shouldn't be any zombies on this road. The zombies in this area should have been killed long ago. Maybe they came from somewhere else. The few of you, go and see what's going on. I feel that these two zombies want to cause trouble. Yes, appearing in such a place where they shouldn't appear, the purpose of these two zombies was definitely not simply passing by. Just when he was distracted by this sudden situation, Chen Yuding and his men had already approached with full vigilance. However, he did not let the convoy rush over immediately. Instead, he stopped 300 to 400 meters away. The people sent by the Chinese side to investigate the situation on both sides quickly found a large number of zombies gathering in the distance. Moreover, they were not the kind that walked over slowly. They had ferocious faces, brandishing their claws and baring their fangs as they ran over at an extremely fast speed. Some of them were even lying on the ground, crawling on all fours like wild beasts. Their speed was not slow either. However, they couldn't find any traces of the zombies that issued the call. They could only see the zombies madly swarming towards them from afar. The person who came to investigate immediately felt that something was wrong. He turned around and ran back. He reported the situation to the leader. There's a small number of zombies on the left that are surrounding us. The same situation on the right. Soon, the person who went to investigate on the other side also came back and reported the same thing. Are they coming for us? Their squadron leader, who was also the man who persuaded the undercover agent in Haicheng to carry out this mission, asked with a gloomy expression. Looking at the direction, they are coming for us, but we can't be sure whether they are coming for us or not. The person who went to investigate the situation said to him. The man who originally planned to take advantage of the chaos to sneak into the base's team rolled his eyes and suddenly said, actually, these zombies came at the right time. Let them attack the base's team. In this way, you guys can follow from behind and add fuel to the fire. I think I will have a better chance of sneaking over. Anyway, don't you guys all have medicine to block the zombies? They probably won't attack you guys. Whether these zombies are coming for us or not, hurry up and drink the medicine. The squadron leader immediately gave the order. Then he looked at the man and said, "It seems that this is also fate. If you can't even find a chance to sneak in, then I don't think you are qualified to go to China." The two of them thought very well, but soon they found that they were wrong. 2 minutes later, a large number of zombies immediately appeared in the distance around them. What's going on? Didn't we all drink the medicine? Who didn't drink it? Seeing the horde of zombies rushing towards them, the company leader immediately looked at his subordinates in shock and shouted out loudly, "No, no, no." Several voices immediately answered his question, indicating that everyone had drunk the medicine according to the order. Then why are they still rushing towards us? The squadron leader shouted angrily and then gave the order again, "Start fighting." Therefore, Chun Yuding and the others who were a few hundred meters away heard all kinds of gunshots, explosions, and so on coming from the front. Want to pretend to be robbers to deal with us? Then let's get through this zombie horde first. Chun Yuding stood in front of the car and leaned against it, holding a new type of Chinese gun in his hand, and looked left and right as he spoke. On the battlefield in front of them, Jing Yin and Yin Xiao looked at each other, then split up and quietly attacked the squadron leader from the left and right. The zombies that the two of them brought from Sentient Base's second base legion had their eyes on the 10 level 5 metahumans. Among them, there was a shadow that hid his presence and then sneaked towards the direction of the road where Chun Yuding and the others were. This metahuman had some special skills. His ability was Logia, but he was an insect-type metahuman. Moreover, this insect was a type of camouflage in nature, a type of praying mantis. Although this praying mantis was only a level 5 metahuman, his ability was very special, and it was also a camouflage type. It was the most suitable for gathering intelligence. That was why Wei Haichao wanted him to sneak in his Sentient Base's supply escort team and then sneak into the city. Because of this, not only could he hide his presence and body, but he could also evade the detection of some machines. Wherever he wanted to go, it was as if there was no one there. In other words, no one would be able to detect him. However, those who were 2 levels higher than him could still sense his aura. Chapter 1341. Although the Mantis Paranormal told the Chinese that it would be extremely dangerous and difficult to sneak into this team, he was not that nervous. However, he wasn't that nervous. He was very confident in his stealth skills. It was just that the Chinese were not clear about his abilities. In addition, he had also drunk the drug that the Chinese developed to make the zombies dislike the smell, so he was not worried about being attacked by the zombies. So if he wanted to take the opportunity to sneak into their team, he was very confident that he would succeed. As for showing the difficulty to the other party, it was just to get better treatment in China after the mission was completed. Jing Yin, who was preparing to sneak attack the company leader, suddenly signaled Yin Xiao to stop. Yin Xiao looked at her with a puzzled expression. Jing Yin pointed behind her. There was a strange smell that was quietly sneaking towards Chun Yuding's team. It was said to be a strange smell, but it was because these people drank some kind of drug that suddenly changed the smell on their bodies. This was the drug that the Chinese developed to deal with the zombies. But it did not mean that their smell would completely disappear. It just changed into a different kind of smell. It was like, in the human sense of smell, roasted meat on the table suddenly changed into raw meat with a slightly rotten smell. That was why the zombies lost interest in hunting them. However, in the eyes of zombies like Jing Yin, who had the intelligence of a normal person, of course she would not ignore them like the ordinary zombies. Jing Yin signaled Yin Xiao, and the two of them split up. She wanted to see what kind of ability this person had to be so confident to sneak into their team. As for the company leader, he was only a level 6 paranormal. Yin Xiao still had the ability to deal with him, so she would let her deal with him first. She would come back later to see if the situation needed help. Yin Xiao signaled to her that she understood and continued to move towards the company leader. Jing Yin turned around and quickly chased after the person who was sneaking towards Chun Yuding's team. After following the smell to a position very close to the person, Jing Yin first looked around suspiciously, then she jumped over the person's scent and stopped a little bit in front of it. She stood on a short building, leaning against the wall, and looked down in one direction. In the end, he realized that he couldn't see anything. Apart from the grayish-white color of the scene in her eyes, everything else was very clear. However, when she stared at the source of the smell, she couldn't see any trace of the person. No wonder China only sent one person to carry out the infiltration operation. It turned out that this person had a special skill. The man had completely concealed his presence and figure, but he might not have known that his scent was exposed to Jing Yan's nose. Jing Yan also hid herself in the darkness, carefully observing the movement of the smell. Although she could smell where the person was, the range was only a few meters, so she couldn't accurately capture the person's location. If he wanted to kill his opponent directly, he wouldn't be able to do it accurately. After smelling the invisible person moving again, Jing Yan did not make any other reaction. Instead, he continued to follow the man in the dark and watched him successfully sneak into the back of one of the military trucks without Chun Yuting noticing. These military trucks were originally used to transport supplies. After arriving at Sea City, the supplies were all unloaded, so the back of the truck was empty. There used to be more than a dozen soldiers inside, but now the soldiers got out of the truck and stood guard. Jing Yan glanced at the truck from afar and sneered in her heart. Then, she suddenly appeared in front of Chun Yuting, and before he could react, she whispered in his ear, "There's a mouse sneaking into the back of the 4th military truck." Chun Yuting suddenly turned his head to look at her, a little surprised. However, neither he nor Jing Yan turned back to look at the 4th military truck. Instead, they acted as if they didn't pay attention to the 4th truck. How is that possible? Why didn't I sense his presence? A special ability user? When did he go in? Chun Yuting frowned and asked her in a low voice after he recovered from his surprise. Jing Yan said, "It's indeed a special ability user. He went in a minute ago. Not to mention that you can't see him. Even I followed his scent all the way and didn't see him. I think he should be the same type as Captain L. March." Chun Yuting nodded and said, "Since it's a little mouse, we can't directly make a move on the truck. We have to find a way to force him out of the truck, but we can't let him escape. After all, if they directly made a move on the truck, it might cause them to lose a truck. Throw a gas bomb at him." Chun Yuting turned his head and said to Jing Yan. Jing Yan immediately nodded and turned around to get a gas bomb. Now that they were in a normal place, the other party obviously wouldn't wear a gas mask or anything. As long as the other party was human, they would definitely react to the gas bomb. The Mantis ability user was squatting in the back of the 4th military truck. He thought to himself that his mission was more than half completed. Now he just needed to wait for the truck to drive into the base, then he would be able to enter smoothly. Why didn't China send someone like him, who had a special invisibility ability, to carry out this kind of mission? For him, this was the simplest and most proficient task. However, those idiots from China only knew how to make him wait, saying that it wasn't the right time to do anything unnecessary, lest he was exposed. He had never failed to find out what he wanted to find out. It should be known that the information that the Sea City cultivation base could not be planted on the land was also obtained by him. Otherwise, the people from China would continue to be deceived by the pretense made up by Wu Qingyue, Xiao Yunlong, and Zhou Shui. At this moment, suddenly a smoke bomb was thrown into the truck from the outside, and a strong and pungent gas instantly filled the entire truck. The Mantis ability user was shocked and quickly covered his nose and jumped out. As a result, a large net suddenly fell from the sky and trapped him. Plop! An invisible figure wrapped in a large net made of hemp rope fell to the ground behind the truck. The shape of the net immediately exposed the invisible person. Bang, bang, bang. As soon as he fell to the ground, 3 gunshots immediately rang out, and 3 bullets hit the middle of the net. "In, you guys!" With a muffled groan, a figure appeared in the middle of the net. He rolled on the ground and stared in disbelief at Chun Yuting, who was withdrawing his gun. He wanted to ask something, but before he could finish his words, his whole body was paralyzed. Dead. Chapter 1342. After the death of the mantis metahuman, Jing Yin immediately left the place and quickly headed towards Yin Zhao's direction. Faced with two elite level 5 zombie teams and a group of over 1,000 wild zombies, the 100-plus people from China were naturally not able to escape the fate of being wiped out. In the end, other than the energy cores being dug out, the rest also fell into the mouths of the wild, ordinary zombies. Chen Yuding and the rest did not delay for long and continued back to the base. After returning to the base, they handed in the report the next morning. Lin Feng frowned when he saw that they had been ambushed last night. As expected, China's movements were getting more frequent. They were actually able to make a move on the team escorting the supplies. Moreover, with this first ambush, there would probably be another one and another one after that. Moreover, the other party had already started to send out special-type metahumans. It was likely that they would also send people with special abilities next time. Special metahumans that could turn invisible and avoid the detection of various machines and even hide their aura were definitely not lacking. China's population was huge. There would be all kinds of people with special abilities. I feel that Xikong Chun is finally getting serious. We are still able to defend against this, but Haiqing might leak out. After all, there are too many people around Leader Wu who know about our secret. Chen Yuding's expression was also much more serious than usual. Xikong Chun would definitely increase the focus of his special abilities to deal with Haiqing. If they were to discover the secret of the base from Haiqing, then not only would their base be in danger, Haiqing, which had a close relationship with their base, would also be in danger. After all, there were still 800,000 to 900,000 survivors in Haiqing. If they were to find out about this, it would definitely cause an internal uproar. At that time, even if the three leaders wanted to suppress them, it would be more difficult. They could not possibly suppress them with force, right? The consequences would only be more severe. Lin Feng sighed. This day will come. Now that the leader hasn't returned, we can only prepare for the worst as soon as possible. Send a message to Wu Changyue and see what he is prepared to do. The worst-case scenario was for the zombie army in the base to be discovered by others, and then they would not care about how the humans outside the base would view them. The human survivors in the base would probably start a civil war. At that time, if they were to attack from both inside and outside, it would be troublesome to deal with them. It was better to resolve the civil war that had yet to germinate. After all, half of them were humans, and the other half were zombies. Paper would not be able to contain fire one day. Since they were going to be exposed no matter what, it was better to let them react first and deal with the humans in their base. Chen Yuding heard his words and saw that his expression had suddenly become fierce. He couldn't help but ask doubtfully, "Worst-case scenario? You mean?" After some thought, Qin Yi furrowed his brows. "You're thinking of making an internal announcement first? Brainwash them? But isn't this too risky?" Since it was called brainwashing, of course, they would use all kinds of methods to implement it. At that time, whether it was through coercion, bribery, or death threats, he would use any means necessary to make these people accept the existence of the second base army. However, if he revealed this information to them, would they agree to it? What if he had a guilty conscience? This was really too risky. After all, the survivors who joined the base were all humans, and human thoughts were sometimes very stubborn and paranoid. That's our top priority. If it still doesn't work, we'll have to deal with it. If it still doesn't work, then in order to keep the secret of the base forever, they only have two choices. However, this matter still needs to wait for the leader to come back to make the final decision. And it won't be implemented immediately until the last moment. We should think about how to strengthen the secrecy. Lin Feng nodded to him expressionlessly. Chen Yuding thought at this time. Fortunately, when they joined the base, they all signed the agreement. The initiative is still on our side. When the base was just established, their leader had already implemented the implementation of the confidentiality agreement after the survivors joined the base. No matter what the background of this base was, they couldn't reveal the information here. Only in this way could they enjoy a well-fed and comfortable life here. But we can slowly start with the army first. Just treat it as psychological counseling. Like other people, we can slowly infiltrate them. Lin Feng put his finger on the table and gently tapped it, thinking about it before saying. To be honest, on the side of the first base army, there were already a few people who knew about this. However, if they wanted to continue to do psychological counseling, they still had to choose. Chun Yuding said, "Why don't we discuss this matter with the people in the second base and ask for their opinion?" Lin Feng nodded. "I think so too. Let's send the news to them first. Prepare for the meeting tonight, but the news to Leader Wu and Haicheng should be sent as soon as possible." Chun Yuding stood up. "I understand. I'll do it now." When Xiao Lily, Elmar, and the others received the news, all of them showed a surprised expression. On the roof, Xiao Lily was nestled in the arms of Lin Kuei, who was in the form of a black panther, and said in surprise, "Do you think Lin Feng's plan is too risky?" Their first reaction was that it was too risky. After all, if all the survivors in the base knew about this, then wouldn't it be the same as magnifying the chances of the information being leaked? Lin Kuei shook one of his ears and said he was talking about the last stage. What he meant was, if there were only zombies in our base and no humans, then as long as we do a good job of protection, there would definitely be no chance of the information being leaked. But now, half of us are humans, and the other half are zombies. Both sides live together, and one day, the humans will discover the secret of our second base. Then, if we are discovered without knowing, and the other side secretly spreads the news, then the danger of having a traitor in our base will cause a situation where we can't react in time. I think he wants to control the humans in the base first, and try to avoid the situation of a traitor being undercover as much as possible. Because if we act first, we still have a lot of initiative. As the saying goes, it's hard to guard against a thief in the house. Hearing this, Xiao Lily understood a little. Oh, so that's it. She looked in the direction of the north, and a strong red light flashed in her ruby-like eyes. It seems that the first battle for the survival of our base is about to begin. I hope Xiao Xiao can come back soon. Chapter 1343. Lin Kuei flicked his tail and turned his head to lick her hand. "Don't worry, we won't be exposed that easily. Even if the people in the base discover us, we won't let them leak the news. But we still need to take precautions so that we are mentally prepared and won't be caught unprepared." Xiao Lily shrugged her shoulders and said, "That's true. Even if the whole world knows that our base is a zombie base, we won't be afraid. At worst, we'll just chase all the humans out. Even if we are zombies, we have our right to live." Humph. Just as Lin Feng was about to make a plan to prevent the base from leaking out, a female nurse in the medical center was quietly searching for something in Lin Hao's office. This female nurse was an ordinary person and not a psychic. But she was able to successfully sneak into Lin Hao's office because she had been watching Lin Hao's working hours for a long time. Lin Hao was currently investigating the Yuanxing situation in the isolation zone for psychics, so she had the time to come here to look for something. After rummaging through the filing cabinet for a while, she suddenly saw a secret compartment behind the document she had pushed open. The female nurse was delighted, thinking to herself, "Why would I be afraid of not being able to find you?" While thinking happily, she reached out to touch the secret compartment. After digging and pressing for a while, she finally opened the door of the secret compartment, but when she saw the situation inside, her face sank. Because there was a keyhole inside, a key was needed to open it. The female nurse remembered that Lin Hao always carried a bunch of keys on him, but he would only put them aside when he was undergoing surgery. If she wanted to get the keys, she would have to wait until he was undergoing surgery. She closed the secret compartment in annoyance, then put the documents back in place. After searching for a long time, she couldn't find anything, so she could only leave unwillingly. After leaving Lin Hao's office, she quickly ran to the monitoring room. The security guards on duty in the monitoring room were currently lying on the table in deep sleep. After the female nurse covered her face and entered, she quickly turned on the monitoring system. Then she quickly left the adjacent room, and before leaving, she took out a glass bottle of medicine and poured it in. When the liquid in the glass bottle came into contact with the air, it immediately emitted a pile of yellow smoke. At the same time, it also gave off a pungent smell. The smoke in the monitoring room disappeared after 2 minutes, and the security guards slowly woke up after a few more minutes. They woke up in a daze. Their eyes glazed over for more than 10 seconds before they gradually woke up. How did I fall asleep? The first security guard who woke up looked left and right in confusion. In the end, he found that the other three were also sleeping. He immediately stood up and patted the others. Hey, wake up. Why are you all asleep? The others were soon woken up by him. The few of them looked around and then at the monitor screen. There was nothing unusual, so they all thought that it was because they didn't sleep well last night. Maybe because I didn't sleep well last night, I've been very sleepy today. Still sleepy, the other guard said, yawning again. They didn't realize that they were a little slow when they just woke up, so they didn't realize why they fell asleep together. That night, Lin Feng, Elmar, Chiu Lily, and the others were having a meeting. They were discussing the matter of brainwashing the survivors in the base. What I mean is to wait until the truth is out of control before we implement it. Of course, we can't implement it right now. However, I also want to choose a small portion of the people in the base to brainwash them, but I want people from your side to come over and give them one-on-one psychological counseling. Let them see your true identities. I think it'll be more effective this way. Lin Feng explained to the others who were sitting around. Elmar placed her elbows on the table and looked at him thoughtfully. Do we have to do this? What if they seem to be obedient on the surface but resist on the inside? We don't have the ability to sense each other's thoughts like leader, so it's not easy to make a judgment. As long as one of them successfully spreads the news, it will be a huge disaster for us. Lin Feng said, I will choose the people in the army based on the situation, and there won't be many of them. Let's see how the first batch reacts first, then consider whether we should continue with this or not. Elmar thought about it. Although she felt that it was a little inappropriate to do this, it seemed that Lin Feng had already made up his mind. Considering that this was only the testing phase and only a small group of people were chosen for the test, it was still within the scope of control. The rest of the procedures would have to be decided when their leader returned. She looked at Chiu Lily and Lin Kuei and asked, what do you guys think? Chiu Lily didn't think as much as she did, but she said straightforwardly, anyway, the people living with us will find out sooner or later, so why not give them a heads up earlier? It'll save them from overreacting and doing something troublesome later on. Furthermore, we can't hide like this forever. Our army will one day appear in this era in broad daylight, and we don't have to wear sunglasses all day long to hide ourselves. Then she continued, besides, even if we become zombies, we still have the right to live. But we also have the right to live, and we will not take the initiative to harm them. If they discriminate against us or gather to attack us, then let them come. We're not afraid of them. After saying that, she raised her chin and snorted coldly. Elmar looked at her speechlessly. Be careful of Sikong Chun throwing a missile at our base. Can you stop his missile? Chiu Lily stuck out her tongue. It's just a missile. I could have intercepted it in midair. Besides, why do we have to wait until they bomb us with missiles before we can retaliate? Huaxia is always targeting us. We should take the initiative to attack. Elmar was speechless. After thinking about it, why do they have to be afraid of those humans? If they were to talk about an army, not to mention the number of zombies in the whole country, just the number of zombies in a province would be enough to flood Huaxia's base. Why would they be afraid of his missile? Huaxia will be taken care of sooner or later, and Sikong Chun won't live for long. If our base can provide food and resources to the other bases, then they should be willing to sign a peace agreement with us when they are short of food. After all, war will only cause more and more losses for humans, and the population will decrease. Under the premise that we can guarantee that we won't harm them, their wise choice is definitely not to start a war with us. Lin Feng said to them. Chapter 1344. Zombies weren't vegetarians, so the fruits and vegetables grown in the base were, of course, given to these humans. In this case, humans still didn't plan for their own future. Wasn't it too stupid to think about dealing with their base every day? That's true. Although they might discriminate against us, objectively speaking, humans are also selfish and ambitious creatures. In the current situation of food shortage, they will at least compromise with the food we provide on the surface. Lin Feng looked around and said. On the surface, they would accept it, but behind the scenes, they would definitely want more. Humans wouldn't just be satisfied with these things on the surface. You mean signing a peace agreement with them is like water from a well, not water from a river? Elmar didn't expect Lin Feng to have already thought about what would happen after their base was completely exposed. Lin Feng shook his head. That's not what I'm thinking, leader. Therefore, the cultivation base in Wushan wasn't just for the survivors in their base. Lin Xiao wanted to grow a large agricultural base, and then with this agricultural base, other bases would have to consider the value of this agricultural base first when dealing with them. Elmar and Xiao Lily both looked at each other, not knowing that Lin Xiao was thinking about this. Sure enough, as a leader, he really thought far ahead. While they were discussing this matter, the female nurse who had entered Lin Hao's office during the day quietly appeared in a room. There were other people in the room, and when they saw her, they immediately showed a look of anticipation. How is it? Did you find the woman's information? One of the men immediately stared at her and asked. The female nurse was wearing black casual clothes at this time. After she came in, she looked back outside and closed the door before walking over. She found a seat and sat down casually. I didn't find it, but I found a secret compartment, but I couldn't open it. It was locked. I think the thing locked inside should be the information that Liu Tianyu often went to the hospital to check some time ago, but I don't know how to unlock it, so there's no way to see what's inside. The female nurse said and spread her hands. This woman has changed too much from before. There must be something fishy. We must find out more about her. This information is very valuable. We can't get close to the cultivation base in Wushan, but the hospital is a good place to start. But you have to be more vigilant. Don't expose yourself. Another man looked at the female nurse and reminded. The nurse nodded. I understand. But even if we steal important information, I'm afraid it won't be easy to spread it. Lin Feng sent people to keep a close watch. I heard that as long as someone steps out of the base, they will be killed. Lin Feng would send people to follow them secretly to make sure that they wouldn't secretly trade information with people from other bases. The second base doesn't allow anyone to get close, but from a distance, it looks like an empty city. Why did they make an empty city? Who knows? There's a written rule that we can't get close, so if we're discovered, we'll be shot and executed. For the sake of safety, we can't get close to them for now. Is it really appropriate for us to do this now? On the surface, this base didn't seem to have many people and wasn't very strong. But look, whether it's Hidden Cloud City, Skyfire Base, or even China, none of them have been able to infiltrate this base. Moreover, he felt that there was a strange force behind that woman. Do you still remember the group of zombies we encountered outside the base when we first arrived? I feel that there is something wrong with this group of zombies. Something's definitely wrong. They seem to have some way to control the zombies. But now they're gone. Who knows where they've moved them? If we can find out what's going on, it'll be very valuable to China. The few of them talked one after another while the nurse listened quietly and didn't interrupt. These were the people who'd entered from Hidden Cloud City or Earth Dragon. When they'd first arrived, they'd signed the agreement because of the pressure of survival. However, these people were not honest people. After settling down for a period of time, they began to have strange thoughts. To them, this was just a temporary place to stay. Their final destination was either Haicheng or China. No matter what, they'd choose to leave this base and join another one. Now that China was targeting Haicheng and the base, it meant the value of the information they'd receive was high. If they could get their hands on good information, they'd be able to get a lot of supplies and weapons from Haicheng. The way they saw it, if Sikong Chan got serious about this base, he definitely wouldn't be able to hold on for long. It was better for them to throw out a few escape routes first. Let's not worry about anything else. Let's see how we can get Lin Hao's keys. Seeing these people getting further and further away, the nurse couldn't help but pull them back. No matter how valuable the secret of this base was, they'd have to get their hands on it to know. Before they knew what the secret of this base was, it was obviously useless to think about it. Then do you know where he put his keys? How do you want to get them? Someone asked her. The nurse said, he has a string of keys that he carries with him. I think it should be in there. The only time this string of keys leaves his side is when he's in surgery. Then does he take it home to sleep and shower? Someone asked her, puzzled. The nurse glanced at him. Then do you have the ability to sneak into his house? I don't have that ability anyway. The building where Lin Hao and the others lived had very tight security. Previously, some people had tried to sneak in, but they were either discovered before they could go upstairs, or they never came out after they went in. In any case, based on their observations, it was impossible to enter the residential area of that important person. It would definitely be more difficult than making a move in the hospital. As soon as she said that, the others fell silent. Then they said, "All right then, let's make a move while he's in surgery." Lin Hao, who still didn't know the key string on his waist was being targeted, was standing outside Du Yuanxing's isolation room, looking at the situation inside through the glass. Du Yuanxing had a special electric ability, so at this moment, his entire body was flickering with layers of electric current. The bed he was lying on was specially made with insulators such as plastic and dry wood, and the entire isolation room was temporarily isolated with a layer of plastic, in case the electricity on his body suddenly exploded and electrified the entire hospital. How is it? Is the energy explosion about right? Lin Hao looked at Du Yuanxing lying inside for a while, then turned his head to ask the medical staff beside him. Chapter 1345. Looking at the data, it's almost there. I estimate that he should be able to break through within 4 hours. The medical staff beside him said to him. Lin Hao looked at Du Yuanxing inside, rejoicing in his heart that there was still a large amount of lake water left behind by his sister. After giving Du Yuanxing 3 cups of water, the electric current on his body was only limited to his body. It must be known that a few days ago, when the electric current was acting up, everyone had to wear isolation suits and rubber gloves before they dared to touch him. They were also afraid that they would be electrocuted into slag if they were not careful. Finally, there's another level 6 arcanist. That's great. Lin Hao nodded, then suddenly sighed and said, there was no other way. The number of rank 6 metahumans in their base number 1 was just too few. Thinking about the number of rank 6 zombies in the second base, Lin Hao silently felt that the first base was really many times weaker than the other side. He didn't know when they would be able to reach the number of the other side. The medical staff looked at him and smiled, comforting him. There will be more and more in the future, and didn't we have more than 10,000 people now? There should be quite a few rank 6 metahumans in this group. Lin Hao thought about it, then nodded and said, that's true. The people who joined this time, there are more than 20 rank 6 metahumans. And just in the March Corps hunting group, there are nearly 10 rank 6 metahumans. Woman really did a good thing. The medical staff thought that when he said Lin Wenwen did a good thing, he was referring to her bringing people over from Haicheng. But he didn't realize that Lin Hao was actually talking about what Lin Wenwen did 7 years ago, so that she would be able to receive the reward from this group of people. After confirming that there were still a few hours before Du Yuanxing's evolution would occur, Lin Hao first returned to his office. He wasn't a zombie, so he couldn't smell the scent left behind by someone entering his office. And that female nurse was also an ordinary person. She didn't have any ability, so she wouldn't have left behind the scent of ability energy. So Lin Hao didn't know that someone had entered his office to search for things not long ago. He took the energy amount of Du Yuanxing for the past 2 days, sat down and looked at it for a while, then put the information on the table and stood up. She turned around and walked to the file cabinet. She removed the files that were blocking the secret compartment. Then she took out a bunch of keys and unlocked the secret compartment. However, the secret compartment did not contain Lin Xiao's information as the nurse had thought. It only contained the energy data of the newly promoted paranormals in the base. After opening the door to the secret compartment, he turned around and placed Du Yuanxing's information inside, then locked it again. After arranging the files, he returned to his seat and started flipping through the other documents. In Haicheng, after confirming that the drug developed by Yin Huiguang and the Shui Ming army could evade the detection of the machines, Lin Feng immediately drew up a plan to send some people from the zombie army in Base 2 to infiltrate China. However, this could only be carried out after Lin Xiao returned and approved it. At this time, Lin Xiao was still trapped above the river. There seemed to be a magnetic field between the energy in the river and the energy above. As long as something passed through the middle, it would cause an energy tornado to descend. Lin Xiao looked at the tornadoes that were moving around each other at a very fast speed. She controlled the flames under her feet to avoid being hit by the moving tornadoes while resisting the suction force produced by the tornadoes. It was very difficult to move to the other side of the river. If it was not for Lin Xiao's precise control, she would have been sucked in. Although the situation was somewhat dangerous, Lin Xiao still slowly moved towards the other side. At this time, a black shadow slowly emerged from the whirlpools in the river, and a sharp cry was heard. Zizi! Lin Xiao looked down and saw human-sized monsters standing up from the middle of the vortex. Then, with a sudden leap, they leaped into the air. What's more, they miraculously passed through the tornadoes. Then, they moved through the tornadoes as if they were swimming in water. And the direction they were moving in was all in Lin Xiao's direction. Fuck! How could there be such things? Seeing these new monsters, Lin Xiao could not help but curse in her heart. These things were not big and were only slightly taller than humans. They were about 2 meters tall and looked like fish with fish heads, fish mouths, and fish gills. On both sides of their necks were 2 long, fan-like fins. There was a row of bone spurs on their backs, and their tails were also very big. Their mouths were extremely large, split to both sides, and filled with eerie teeth. On top of their heads was a mushroom-like crown, which looked very strange. But, judging from their mouths, full of sharp teeth, these things weren't cute at all. After this group of flying fish suddenly jumped out, they moved freely in the tornadoes. They could stop in the tornadoes as if the energy pillars of the tornadoes were supporting them. Lin Xiao narrowly avoided a flying fish monster that pounced on her from the side, and in the next second, she had to avoid another flying fish monster that pounced on her from behind. The situation, which was already not too good to begin with, suddenly escalated. What was more infuriating was that these strange fish monsters were very fast. As long as they retracted their chicken wing-like fins, they would immediately fly over like a sharp arrow. And as long as one of them did this, the others would immediately do the same. So in an instant, they would become a wave of flying fish arrows that rushed towards Lin Xiao. Even with her good control, she could not completely deal with it. What made Lin Xiao even more depressed was that these strange things were not afraid of her flame ability at all. Whoosh! Lin Xiao quickly hid in the space. The 2 rows of people waiting in front of the small building saw her come in and thought that she had crossed to the other side of the river. They were all waiting for Lin Xiao to take them out. In the end, Lin Xiao helplessly sighed and said, "I'm trapped in the middle of the river. I can't go over, and I can't go back either." If it was just those moving energy tornadoes, she could slowly control her ability and slowly move over them. The problem was that the sudden appearance of these flying fish consumed a lot of her mental strength to deal with them. After all, these fish were much more agile than the energy pillars of the energy tornadoes. Hearing her say this, everyone immediately showed a blank expression and looked at each other. What? Even you can't go over? Yuan Tianxing looked at Lin Xiao from the next building. Although his voice was not loud, he knew that Lin Xiao could hear him. Lin Xiao turned to look at him and said, "Do you want me to take you out to see the current situation?" Yuan Tianxing immediately smiled and shook his head. "No, I'm basically crippled now. Do you want me to go out and be a snack for those things?" Chapter 1346. What's the situation outside? Hearing Lin Xiao's words, Duan Wan and the others understood that something unexpected had happened outside. Lin Xiao waved to them to temporarily disperse, then walked into the small building. As he walked, he said, "There's a magnetic field between the river and the energy layer above. It might be because of my appearance that the magnetic field was destroyed, so dense energy tornadoes fell from above. Moreover, these tornadoes are not stationary like the ones we saw before. They can run." Hearing Lin Xiao use the words dense, can run, Duan Wan, Li Zheng, and the others immediately imagined what it was like outside. That was an even crazier scene. The appearance of a group of tornadoes would definitely produce a suction force. And in the end, it was very likely to form a huge tornado, especially since the energy in the wind could not be touched. It was indeed not easy to pass through such a group of living tornadoes. Although everyone felt that it was indeed a bit difficult, they did not expect that even Lin Xiao, who was a level 8 zombie emperor, could not pass through. This was indeed a bit surprising. Lin Xiao could feel their doubts, so he explained, "If it was just these tornadoes, I could indeed pass through, but it would take a bit of time and energy. But after a group of flying fish jumped out from the river, I was a bit unable to do so." The underground creatures were all strange. He had seen a flying cat, and now there was a flying fish. Fish with crowns are also very ugly. Speaking of the last part, she could not help but ridicule. After all, among those fish, the mushroom-like crowns were very eye-catching. It was really not an ordinary kind of ugly. Fish, they can also fly? When the others heard that there was another type of flying fish, they were stunned for a moment. Then they felt that it was reasonable. After all, it was a river. It was normal for there to be fish. Actually, it was not strange for fish to be able to fly. After all, there were some fish that could jump in nature before the end of the world. Not to mention the mutated fish after the end of the world. Not only could they fly, but they could also run ashore. Is there a lot of them? What gave Lin Xiao a headache was that there might be a lot of them, and if they could fly, their speed would definitely be very fast. Lin Xiao nodded. Seeing that they had all come in, he pointed to the sofas and chairs around them and asked them to sit down first. There are indeed a lot of them, and their flying speed is even faster than an arrow fired from a bow. These flying fish aren't weak either. There are at least 5 or 6 of them every day, so it's a little troublesome. Lin Xiao sat on the sofa and leaned against the back of the chair with his arms crossed in front of his chest. After she finished speaking, she squinted her eyes and looked at the changes outside the space. The flying fishes immediately began to fly around aimlessly, darting in and out of the tornadoes. After observing the situation outside, Lin Xiao opened his eyes and said, "I'll come in first to see if those things will disperse after losing their target. If it disperses, then I'll go out and take advantage of the gap. If it really doesn't disperse, then I can only try to force my way through." Anyway, if she really couldn't do it, she could only wrap herself in the flames of her special ability and rush over. Although it was not harmful to her body, it consumed too much of her ability. If he accidentally got sucked into the tornado, he would be sucked into the river below. That wouldn't be good for her. After Lin Xiao disappeared, the flying fishes in the river lost their target and began to aimlessly fly around. Their movements slowly calmed down. However, the situation of the energy tornadoes didn't stop. Although the flying fishes had calmed down, they didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. Instead, they continued to pass through the energy tornadoes, as if waiting for Lin Xiao to appear again. Lin Xiao quietly waited in the space for the situation outside to calm down. The others also found a place to stand, sit, or squat. After more than 10 minutes, Lin Xiao saw the flying fishes begin to fly down one by one, all diving into the water with a whooshing sound. Lin Xiao immediately became spirited. It seemed like these things couldn't wait any longer and gave up. But soon, Lin Xiao found out that she was wrong. This was because after all the flying fishes fell into the water, an incomparably huge fish suddenly emerged from the water. This fish was at least 50 meters long, and its body was more than 10 meters wide. The 2 long fins on both sides spread out like the wings of an airplane. It jumped up and directly jumped up to a height of a few hundred meters. Then it retracted its fins and flipped a few times. After flipping a few times, when it was about to fall down, it once again spread its fins and flew around. Moreover, its flying posture was very light. It swam around in the air as if it was in the water while swinging its soft and huge fishtail. If it wasn't for its ugly appearance, perhaps this would be a beautiful scenery. But its body was too big, so when it jumped up and flipped a few times, it scattered the energy tornadoes around it. Lin Xiao looked at the new Gaga big flying fish and was speechless again. He wanted to ridicule its crown. In fact, the bodies of these fishes could be considered normal. Apart from the fact that they didn't have scales, they were black and shiny. Coupled with the huge tail and two wing-like fins, they weren't ugly at all. It was just that their head shape was too strange, making people unable to look at them directly. Even if you had a bunch of spikes on your head or a bunch of scales and horns, it would still be better than this big mushroom head. After the big fish came out, the small fishes disappeared without a trace. But as soon as the big fish came out, it flew a few rounds and scattered the dense energy tornadoes. The whirlpools under the river also disappeared because of the disappearance of the tornadoes. Looking at the big fish flying around, Lin Xiao couldn't help but think. If this fish looked better or more majestic, it might have a bit of the feeling of the ancient mythological Kuanpeng. However, this guy's appearance really made people unable to associate it with the ancient mythological beast. But Lin Xiao was a little surprised by the movement this big guy made after coming out. It felt like it came out to cause trouble for the tornadoes. It was actually a help to Lin Xiao. Compared to a huge target and a group of densely packed targets, Lin Xiao would rather choose the former. Because there was only one of the former, the absence of the tornadoes really helped her a lot. Thinking of this, she immediately stood up and quickly disappeared in front of the others. The instant her body flashed out of the space, she suddenly waved her hand, and a black flame rolled under her feet, carrying her quickly to the other side of the river. Chapter 1347. Because of the big fish's appearance, its swimming in the sky also disturbed the river and the energy tornadoes above. Therefore, Lin Xiao took this opportunity to quickly fly to the other side of the river. Lin Xiao's appearance immediately attracted the big fish's attention. It suddenly turned around and stared at Lin Xiao with its pair of fish eyes. It opened its huge mouth full of teeth and roared, roar. At the same time, its body flicked its tail and flew towards Lin Xiao. Of course, Lin Xiao's speed was not much slower than it. Without the obstruction of the magnetic field of the tornadoes, she flew out of the river in the blink of an eye. However, she didn't stop because the big fish was still chasing after her. Roar! The big fish flapped its two fins that acted as wings from time to time and flew closely behind Lin Xiao. It flew very fast, opened its huge mouth, and swallowed Lin Xiao in one bite. Lin Xiao made a sharp turn, and at the same time, she threw a huge black flame into its mouth. Puff! The big fish bit the black flame, but black smoke came out of its mouth. Not only did it bite the black flame, but it also bit a mouthful of disgusting black flame. The big fish exhaled angrily, and a cloud of black smoke was spat out by it. Then, it turned around and continued to rush towards Lin Xiao. At this time, Lin Xiao did not want to play with it at all. It would take a lot of time to kill it. Moreover, after biting the flame that she threw out, it casually spat it out. Lin Xiao's flame had no effect on it at all. After coming to this underground space, Lin Xiao felt that her ability was a lot weaker. It was obviously very powerful on the ground, but it was not very useful here. However, even if she could not defeat it, she could still run away. She would be much more relaxed on land. Lin Xiao suddenly landed on the ground, and then his whole body disappeared. Her transparent body quickly flew over the strange plants on the ground and looked up at the flying fish in the sky. Sure enough, the big fish lost its target and turned left and right. It flew to the east and then to the west. Its eyes looked up, down, left, right, front, back and forth, searching for traces of Lin Xiao. After looking around a few more times and not seeing anything, he suddenly plunged down. Who? Piu! Its huge body pressed over the plants on the ground, and its two flat fins cut off the tails of many plants. A gust of wind blew past, blowing the plants on both sides away. Lin Xiao looked at the big fish that was flying around randomly before he turned around and continued forward. The further she went, the more solemn she became. Any random fish that came out of the river was a rank 8 big fish. In addition to the few auras he sensed earlier, how many rank 8 creatures were there in this underground space? The level 8 creatures weren't as easy to deal with as the level 8 creatures on the surface, even though they didn't have any abilities. However, their bodies were tough to an unimaginable degree. It would not be easy to kill them. Moreover, if they were to fight to the death with them, they might even release their innate abilities in the end. Just like how the Zhuang dealt with Wu Chengyue, it was likely that these creatures would not use this move until the very last moment. However, once it was released, it would be a very troublesome situation. Lin Xiao felt that these creatures were not to be trifled with, but she had to find a way to deal with the creatures on the surface. If they only ate zombies, it would be fine, but the problem was that they ate everything. Everything on the ground was their food. Even the soil was probably their food. After all, the soil on the surface was much softer and smoother than the underground. Since all attacks were ineffective against them, she could only look for the problem from their source. The level 8 mutated creature was not easy to deal with. Lin Xiao didn't know how to deal with the level 9 creature, even if she found it. Therefore, he gradually felt some pressure in his heart. Just as Lin Xiao gradually left the river and moved further away from the big fish that was still flying around randomly. Thousands of miles ahead of her, there was a huge pit in the ground. On one side of the pit, about 20 to 30 meters away from her, the soil vibrated slightly for a few times. Then, the ground in these two places suddenly turned up, revealing a pair of huge, mirror-like eyes. The two huge eyes blinked, and in the middle of the two huge eyes, there was a sudden poof sound, and a pile of sand sprayed out from the ground. A strong aura suddenly spread in all directions. Then, the two huge eyes seemed to look up, and after a minute of silence, they suddenly closed again. The bottom of the pit once again became calm, and this huge pit had an area of several kilometers. It was like a dry lake, and the bottom of the lake was 100 to 200 meters deep. At this moment, Lin Xiao suddenly felt a palpitation in her heart. She suddenly stopped on the branch of a plant. She stood up straight, frowned, and closed her eyes to feel around. However, this feeling of palpitation only lasted for a moment, so when she stopped, it disappeared without a trace. But Lin Xiao firmly remembered this feeling. Every time this feeling appeared in her heart, it indicated that some kind of crisis had appeared. This was also a warning that the further she went, the more dangerous it would be. But even if she knew that it was dangerous, of course, she couldn't turn back. After standing there and sensing for a while, Lin Xiao continued to jump forward. Before Lin Xiao crossed the river, the big red cat was anxiously pacing back and forth. It raised its head to look in Lin Xiao's direction from afar, while its feet kept moving in circles and its tail was already drooping down. Turn left, turn right, raise your head, take a look. Turn left again, turn right again, raise your head again, take another look. Its two big red eyes were also filled with anxiety. After turning a few rounds, it couldn't help but take a few steps in Lin Xiao's direction, but quickly retreated. After retreating, it raised its head, stretched its neck, and raised its chin. It opened its mouth and let out a few strange long howls. It seemed to want to convey something to Lin Xiao. Apart from it, the other underground creatures also began to restrain their aura. Even the big fish that was flying around suddenly plunged into the river with a plop sound, not to mention the underground creatures that could run and jump. Even the moving, mutated plants shrunk into a ball and remained motionless. Lin Xiao, who was running forward, suddenly stopped. She turned her head to look behind her. Her eyes revealed a puzzled expression as she looked behind her in bewilderment. Why did she seem to have heard a few big red sounds just now? Was it an auditory hallucination? Chapter 1348. Lin Xiao turned around and knitted her brows in confusion. Logically speaking, she should be more than 10 kilometers away from Big Red. No matter how good her hearing was, it was impossible for her to hear Big Red's voice from so far away. Unless it chased after her. Lin Xiao turned around again and felt that something was wrong, because she could vaguely feel that Big Red's aura was still there. After thinking for a while, she turned around and continued forward. However, the further she went, the more frequent the chills on her back became. Every instinct in her body was telling her not to go any closer. She arrived at a suddenly flat and empty space. In front of her was a desolate and empty space without any plants. The ground was dark rock, and she couldn't see the end of it even after looking for a long time. Not only was this place empty, but even the energy layer above was much shorter and very thick. However, the strange thing was that there were no energy tornadoes landing on the ground. It was quiet all around, and even the energy layer above was much calmer. However, after arriving here, Lin Xiao smelled an unusual scent. This scent was very strong, indicating that this land was not to be invaded by other creatures. Intruders would be completely strangled. Not to mention that there were no other auras on this barren plain. There were no auras of other creatures in the surroundings. Lin Xiao stood on a tree at the obvious border and looked at the empty space in front of her. She knew that she had arrived at her destination. The aura in this land overlapped with the uneasy aura she felt before. This meant that the danger she felt along the way was coming from here. Moreover, it also meant that this level 9 creature was awake and not in a state of hibernation. Although the area in front of her was barren, the presence of this aura made this place a very mysterious and terrifying forbidden area. Lin Xiao heaved a sigh of relief before leaping forward and entering the area. She was currently invisible, so she could only run forward with her feet. It wasn't that she couldn't use her ability, but the aura of her ability would definitely attract the attention of that thing. Although she was running, Lin Xiao's speed was not slow. As a level 8 zombie emperor, her physical strength couldn't be ignored. When he ran, he was like a gust of wind that couldn't be seen by the naked eye. The sound of her footsteps on the ground was very, very soft, so even though the area was very quiet, the sound of her running footsteps could not be heard. When he stood at the border and looked at the open space, he estimated that it was at least 10 to 20 kilometers in radius. However, after Lin Xiao followed the aura and kept running forward, she felt that the open space here should be more than 10 or 20 miles wide. It was very big. Lin Xiao, who had been running for half an hour, felt that with her current speed, she should be able to run more than 300 kilometers per hour. After running for half an hour, he still couldn't see the end in front of him. It could be imagined how many kilometers he had already run. It was at least 100 kilometers away, and he didn't know how long it would take to reach the border. With such a large territory, it seemed that this rank 9 fellow was also a colossus. Following the strong smell, Lin Xiao got closer and closer to the sunken pit. There was nothing around her. If it wasn't for Lin Xiao's sharp sense of direction, she would have lost her direction. Just when Lin Xiao was thinking about how far the nest of that thing was, she suddenly saw a huge pit in the distance. When she was a few kilometers away from the pit, she suddenly smelled a smell that was 100 times stronger than before. That's right, it's here. Lin Xiao's heart settled, and she immediately slowed down her pace. She slowly walked forward until she reached the edge of the pit. Only then did she see the scene below. It was dry down there, and the terrain was uneven. The bottom was also about 100 to 200 meters deep. The strong smell coming from below made Lin Xiao cover her nose. Apart from the strong smell of this creature, there was also a rotten smell. She didn't know what kind of beast it was. The center of the pit was clean, but the edge was filled with all kinds of huge beast bones. The bones at the top were still fresh, but mixed with the smell of the corpses in the middle for a period of time. The smell in the pit could suffocate a large number of people to death. Lin Xiao looked at the beast bones and found that the skulls were very large. Some of the skulls were more than 10 meters wide. The other ribs and vertebrae were very thick, with a diameter of 3 to 6 meters. It seemed that this creature's appetite was also very big, and from the residual energy on these beast bones, they were all mutated beasts that were not lower than rank 7. This creature's appetite was so big, but it still chased the underground creatures out. Why? Wasn't it afraid of starving to death? Or were the rank 7 and 8 underground creatures not its subordinates, but actually its food? Thinking of this, Lin Xiao looked back. She looked past the pit in front of her and to the left and right sides. Then, she lowered her head to stare at the center of the pit and pondered. Along the way, she didn't count those that hid their auras. Not only did she sense the auras of rank 8 creatures, but there were also many rank 7 creatures. Moreover, it was easier for her to sense the rank 7 creatures. Why did it leave a large number of rank 7 and above creatures here, while those that were chased out were below rank 7 and a few were rank 7? Lin Xiao looked at the surrounding barren environment in confusion, then turned to look at the underground jungle behind her that could no longer be seen. Since she couldn't figure it out alone, she might as well go into the space and think about it together with everyone. As soon as he thought of this, Lin Xiao immediately disappeared above the hole. After Lin Xiao came in, the others looked at her quietly. None of them made a sound. Lin Xiao glanced at them and found that Yuan Tianqing had also run over and was sitting on a single cedar sofa. I'm at the edge of the rank 9 creature's lair. It's hiding in a pit. It's probably pretending to be asleep, not in a deep sleep. As far as I could see, its territory was empty with nothing around it. Apart from dark rock and soil, there are no plants, not even rocks. It's flat. However, there's a pit about 3 to 5 kilometers wide and 200 meters deep in the middle. It's hiding there. The bottom of the pit was filled with the leftover bones of the 9th level creature, piled up in a circle. I reckon that its appetite is astonishing. Also, I can sense the auras of many rank 7 and 8 underground beasts along the way. There are very few that are below rank 5 and 6, except for the fish in the river. Lin Xiao sat on the sofa and explained the situation outside to the people in the living room. So, why do you think it chased so many low-level beasts, which are its food, to the surface? Chapter 1349. After listening to Lin Xiao's explanation of the situation outside, everyone revealed a surprised expression. Then, they all looked like they were in deep thought. You mean this thing has a huge appetite and needs a lot of energy? The underground creatures we encounter on the surface were all below level 6 or 7, so there are almost no creatures below level 5 in this space. That means it doesn't need to prey on these low-level creatures at all. It should be able to leave them alone. Duan Wan analyzed the information given by Lin Xiao and said aloud, "Then why did it suddenly chase out these creatures that it doesn't care about?" Lu Tianyi crossed his arms in front of his chest and suddenly thought of a problem. By the way, the plants we found along the way seem to be in good condition. In other words, these creatures shouldn't eat the food underground. Does it mean that the creatures below are carnivores and not herbivores? Lin Xiao said, "Each of these plants contains the energy in the fog layer above. Maybe they can't eat these plants. After all, they can even eat soil when they come to the surface." I felt that this situation is more or less related to the thick layer of energy above this space. From the creatures they encountered before, and when they saw Big Red appear, it completely avoided the energy tornadoes that fell from the sky. And it was even more obvious when they reached the river. Could it be that there was something wrong with the energy that affected them and caused them to be chased out by the level 9 creature? Yuan Tianqing said at this time, "Could it be that this level 9 creature has encountered a critical situation? Or perhaps there's some change in the energy layer above this underground space. We have no idea what the level 9 creature's intention is for chasing these low-level creatures out, whether it's good or bad. So it's very difficult to find a reason. Based on the current situation, you have to continue to spend time observing the actions of this level 9 creature, and whether there will be any big changes in the energy layer above this space. Only then will you know the answer." This was because studying nature and wild animals was something that required a lot of time and observation. Lin Xiao narrowed her eyes and looked outside. After seeing that it was still very calm, she retracted her gaze. She opened her eyes and nodded thoughtfully. "That's true. I just don't know how much this big guy will eat at one time. The rank 7 and 8 creatures here are all huge, but after seeing the nest of this rank 9 creature, I reckon that this big fellow is many times bigger than those rank 8 creatures. At the very least, a dozen tons of prey might not even be enough for it to eat. I guessed. However, if he could see this guy eating, then observe its habits and the frequency and amount of food it ate, he should be able to get more information. There's always a reason for the changes in nature. This big guy must have a special reason for doing this, Lu Tianyi said. I'm more curious about what this thing looks like. We've never seen these underground creatures before. They all look very strange. It's really rare. Li Zheng muttered from the corner. Speaking of these level 9 creatures, they had yet to see any creatures that they had never seen before. Humans' curiosity and desire for knowledge were really strong. Although they were afraid of the unknown, they were also curious and wanted to know the truth and so on. In order to know more about this rank 9 creature, Lin Xiao brought some people to guard the edge of its nest and waited patiently. Time passed day by day. The zombies in the space didn't need to eat, but the group of humans did. Fortunately, Lin Xiao had everything in the space. She also brought enough dry food for the people who left. On the 8th day, there was still no movement. However, it was time to send someone back to the surface to report the situation. So Lin Xiao came out of the space again. On the way back, she had a more accurate target than when she went, so her speed was much faster. However, she ran out of the territory of the rank 9 creature and controlled her ability to accelerate. Lin Xiao spent most of the day to return to the river. When she reached the river, Lin Xiao stopped for a while. With the previous experience, she didn't fly over slowly. Instead, she accelerated and flew over. Sure enough, even if she accelerated in the blink of an eye, when she passed 2/3 of the river, there was a sudden gust of wind above her head. Hundreds of tornadoes fell from the sky. However, this wasn't much of an obstacle for Lin Xiao. Last time was the first time she was in an unknown situation. For safety's sake, she was cautious and slow. This time, she clearly knew that she couldn't stay on the river for too long. Otherwise, those flying fishes would be attracted. So she increased the control of her ability and successfully passed through the river. She continued to rush toward the cave that she came from. Among the group of people that Lin Xiao brought, there wasn't anyone with invisibility ability. Therefore, to send them out for safety's sake, they had to go up in groups of 3. 1 human with ability and 2 from the zombie army. Moreover, the cave needed to be sent up by someone who could fly. Otherwise, it would be a bit troublesome for them to climb up. The top of the rock wall was sloping upwards. Both sides were sloping inwards because the bottom of the cave was big and the top was small. They weren't like those underground creatures that could climb up the wall. When they were not far from the cave, Lin Xiao smelled the scent of some living people. Her eyes flashed. That woman from China still left people here. She really didn't know what was good for her. The people who stayed here were at most rank 6. After Lin Xiao went over, she waved a black flame and engulfed all of them in an instant. She released Li Zheng and the 2 rank first kings before sending them straight up to the top of the cave. When they jumped down, it took a long time, and it took them a long time to get up. Fortunately, Lin Xiao could fly, so she successfully sent Li Zheng and the other 2 up. After coming down, Lin Xiao didn't leave immediately. Instead, she waited on the spot. Sure enough, not long after, Qingshan Base and Kong Qingming's team returned. Xie Dong, Lu Feng, and the others that Lin Xiao sent out earlier also appeared. I knew you would come back here at this time. How is it? Did you find any other way out? Lin Xiao looked at them and asked. Lei Cheng shook his head. Apart from this rock wall, there really isn't any other way up. Xie Dong and the others shook their heads. Lin Xiao looked at them and noticed that apart from Xie Dong's team, Lu Feng and Kong Qingming's teams were in a bit of a mess. It seemed that they had encountered some aggressive things these days. Chapter 1350. Even the ones that Lin Xiao encountered weren't easy to deal with. Seeing that Xie Dong and the others were still standing there in good condition, she heaved a sigh of relief. Did the messenger go up? After Lei Cheng arrived and saw Lin Xiao, he knew that she should have sent the messenger up. Lin Xiao nodded. Yes. Did you guys find anything? At the beginning, we encountered people from Huaxia who came looking for trouble, but we avoided them. The others realized that the creatures that could fly and run in this underground space were all very high level. Moreover, the creatures and plants in this underground space seem to advance several times faster than the mutated beasts on the surface. Level 7 and 8 beasts can be seen everywhere. Kong Qingming put his hands in his pockets and said as he thought about the situation he had encountered these days. Lei Qing nodded. That's true. The plants and creatures in this space are all very powerful and dangerous. Lin Xiao didn't tell them that Xia Longyun had left people here. There was no need to say it since it had already been dealt with. I got some clues and found some things. There's a level 9 creature in this space. It should be the strongest ruler in this space. It suddenly chased all the low-level creatures out. But I don't know why. For what I observed, that thing has a big appetite. It should eat a lot in one meal, but the creatures left in this space shouldn't be able to sustain it for a long time. She said to everyone. She meant that after it finished eating the level 7 and 8 creatures, it would probably use the small ones to fill up its food. But the problem was that it chased all the small ones out. While Lin Xiao was sharing the clues with the others, the level 9 creature lurking in the deep pit in the middle of the underground space opened its 2 huge eyes once again. Then, there was a tremor, and the uneven ground at the bottom of the pit was arched up by something. An incomparably huge creature slowly climbed up, its 2 huge mirror-like eyes flashing with a hint of light. It slowly raised its head. After its whole body emerged from the ground, its torso also rose up, its 2 huge front paws propped up, and then its 2 hind legs. When its whole body emerged from the ground, a strange beast-shaped pit immediately appeared. The huge creature stood up and shook its body. Its huge head twisted left and right, and its 2 huge eyes that were 2 meters in diameter looked around. In fact, when it stood up from the bottom of the pit, its whole body was tens of meters tall, but it was still supporting itself with its 4 legs. From head to tail, its body was more than 300 meters long. After it stood up, the energy mist layer above it began to surge. Then, a huge whirlpool descended from the sky, slowly descending above its head. After the commotion on this side spread, the creatures within 100 kilometers of this wasteland panicked and ran in all directions. All of them, including the level 8 underworld creatures, returned to their caves and hid in their own caves. The behemoth stood quietly at the bottom of its own pit. When the energy vortex above it descended, it raised its head and opened its huge mouth to withstand the energy vortex that descended from above. Lin Xiao, who was in the middle of speaking, suddenly stopped and looked in the direction of the level 9 creature. Then she squinted her eyes and looked at the fog above her head. The layer of thick fog above her head was slowly moving in that direction. Lin Xiao squinted her eyes and saw that the layer of energy was also converging in that direction. Seeing that, Lin Xiao suddenly stopped talking and looked up at the sky. The others also looked up in confusion. What's the situation? Is the fog moving in that direction? Lin Xiao opened her eyes and said, It's awake. All of you stay here and don't move. I'll go take a look myself. It was a good opportunity to observe that creature. She had been waiting for it to wake up. It didn't wake up while she was waiting, but it woke up after she left. After Lin Xiao finished speaking, he disappeared in a flash, leaving the crowd looking at each other. They didn't dare to follow her, because Lin Xiao said that the level 9 creature had woken up. Behind him, Lin Xiaoying used a method of leaping and quickly advanced in that direction. Her running speed was much faster than the fog above her head, but she had to use her ability to cross the river. Maybe it was because of the abnormal situation above, but when Lin Xiao flew over, there was no energy tornado. After flying over the river, she immediately switched to stealth mode and continued to move forward. She wasn't sure if the creature could sense her from such a distance, but it was best not to be discovered. After Lin Xiao ran to the desolate place, she slowed down and jogged into the wasteland. After arriving here, she felt a lot of pressure. Although her instincts kept telling her not to get close, she couldn't get any closer. But how could she get a tiger cub without entering the tiger's den? If she didn't get close, how could she observe the creature's intentions? She looked at the fog above her head quickly gathering in the direction of the deep pit. When Lin Xiao was a few hundred meters away from the pit, she found that she had reached her limit. She couldn't get any closer. Not only was the level 9 creature emitting an aura stronger than the level 9 Dong Xiaowei, but even the energy fog above her was condensing a powerful pressure. Although Lin Xiao wasn't afraid, her body was somewhat out of control. Her hands and feet began to not listen to her, as if her instincts were stripping away her consciousness. She stood in place, motionless as she looked at the nest of the level 9 creature. This situation immediately made her feel that something was wrong, because she almost forgot that she almost lost control before. Her zombie instincts almost robbed her of her body. The energy fog in the deep pit was getting heavier and lower. But at this moment, the deep pit suddenly burst. Roar dash, a loud roar came from there, and then the energy fog above suddenly exploded. Billowing waves of air rolled out in all directions. The power of this roar was so strong that Lin Xiao's whole body shook. Her whole mind instantly became light, and then there was a moment of blurriness. At the last moment, a thought flashed through Lin Xiao's consciousness, and she reacted in time to pull herself into the space. Bang dash. The way she entered the space wasn't too normal because she fell from above. But she was already unable to control her body, and her whole consciousness entered an erratic state. Chapter 1351. The place where Lin Xiao fell into the space was the open space in front of the small building. She lay on the ground with her eyes completely black. It was so black that even her eyeballs had melted and disappeared. Ugh! Roar! Lin Xiao felt that her body was slowly losing control. She wanted to concentrate on controlling her body, but she found that she was powerless. After Lin Xiao came in, the zombies and other mutant beasts in the space quickly noticed that her situation was a bit strange. Her breath was bursting out in a mess, and the energy in her body was also changing bit by bit with this kind of strange disorder. It started to become strange, but it also seemed normal. Lin Xiao bared her teeth and rolled on the ground with a somewhat fierce expression. She lay on the ground with her palms wide open and dug into the ground. Sharp black nails that were 2 or 3 centimeters long grew on her fingers, leaving a deep groove on the ground. Roar dash! Lin Xiao lay on the ground with both hands deeply scratching the ground. She suddenly raised her head and let out a zombie's roar. She opened her mouth and let out a zombie-like roar, but when she opened her mouth, the upper and lower rows of teeth were different. His teeth, which were originally flat, had now become sharp. It wasn't like in the beginning when only 2 of her canines were sharp, but now all of her teeth had become sharp. Sharp, dense, and oppressive, this was the original form of a zombie. Seeing Lin Xiao's abnormal change, the dozen or so zombies that were originally walking in the vegetable field all stood still and stared at Lin Xiao. The level 4 zombies in Lin Xiao's army had not yet recovered their human memories, but many of them had been trained to remember some common sense. At this time, these level 4 zombies instinctively felt that the current Lin Xiao had become strange and was not the leader they knew before. Especially now that Lin Xiao was now a level 8 zombie emperor and her breath was still everywhere. Her pressure completely suppressed them. So now these level 4 zombies were not standing there voluntarily, but they were frozen. They were completely unable to resist Lin Xiao's pressure, and their bodies were no longer under their own control. Their entire consciousness was completely suppressed by the pressure that was 4 levels higher than them, and they didn't even have the ability to think. He could only stand still and look in Lin Xiao's direction. Roar! Roar! Lin Xiao's body was on the ground. His 2 hands were still grabbing the ground in front of him while his 2 legs kicked a few times. She suddenly retracted her 2 arms and began to slowly prop herself up with her 4 limbs. After slowly propping herself up like a wild beast, she slowly raised her head from the ground on all 4s. Her long hair, which had fallen down due to her rolling on the ground just now, was disheveled and supported her face. Ao, Hua, who had been left in the space, ran to the edge of the forest. It stared at Lin Xiao in confusion. It wanted to go over and see what was happening to Lin Xiao, but it didn't dare to go over due to Lin Xiao's abnormal change in aura. The cages of chickens, ducks, and geese that were sent to the back of Lin Xiao's 3 buildings had all shrunk into the corners of the cages, not daring to move. The mutant beasts on the other side of the lake had all disappeared. Lin Xiao's body used her 4 limbs to prop herself up on the ground. Her body arched back and forth, then she slowly raised her head. The face under her hair was very sinister. From the corner of her eyes, there were a few strange black lines that were faintly discernible. A pair of strange black eyes peeked out from between the gaps of her hair. She slowly lifted her upper body, then stood up bit by bit without wavering. But after she stood up, her posture was somewhat unnatural. After standing up, her head drooped down again. Both of her knees were bent, and her 5 fingers forcefully opened and closed, then opened and closed again. At this time, the other zombies felt that her aura was completely different from before. It was as if she was a completely different zombie. The people who were left outside the space didn't know about this. However, after the rank 9 creature roared and exploded the condensed energy mist above it, it didn't take long for the level 9 creature to explode. The energy fog began to disperse. The level 9 creature lifted its front legs and climbed to the edge of the deep pit, slowly climbing out of the nest. Bang! Bang! After reaching the surface, this huge monster shook the ground with every step it took. As it walked, it moved its head left and right, its heavy body slowly moving forward. As it walked, its feet began to slowly step into the void, as if it was walking up a flight of stairs, one step at a time. It was as if there was an invisible ladder beneath its feet, supporting it as it walked upwards. The giant monster, which was still very heavy on the ground, walked into the void. When it walked up to the empty space, its body became very light. When it walked up to a height of 700 to 800 meters, it stopped. Its 2 huge eyes looked around for a while. Then it suddenly stared in one direction. And the people of Sea City and Green Mountain, who were a few hundred kilometers away, after feeling this aura, each of them felt as if there was something pressing down on their heads. Not only did this pressure suppress the feelings in their hearts, but it also suppressed the restrictions on their bodies. It seems that this big guy is really strong. How is the difference between this and the pressure of your base's leader? Kong Qingming looked in that direction and couldn't help but ask Lei Cheng. Lei Cheng expressionlessly looked in the same direction as him. After hearing his question, Lei Cheng nodded. After a few seconds of silence, he said, "It's much stronger than our leader when he was at his peak. It doesn't seem like it's on the same level." The others looked at each other, especially the people of Sea City. They couldn't help but reveal a worried expression. They hoped that their leader wouldn't be unlucky enough to find out. Even if it was a level 8 zombie emperor, it would probably be unlucky if it encountered this thing. After all, it was a level 9 monster that could even sense them from a few hundred kilometers away. Lei Cheng was also aware of his autistic leader's explosive strength. When Dong Xiaowei's ability erupted the last time, he destroyed 60% of the buildings in their original base. If this guy went up, it would not take long for him to completely destroy their intact base. Therefore, their strength was really not on the same level. In such a situation, it was best to hide as far as possible. Is it going to get up to look for food? I really don't know how much it will eat. Kong Qingming guessed that this guy should be hungry. Our leader said that a large level 8 monster might not be enough for it to eat. At this time, Li Zheng said aloud, Chapter 1352. The gigantic monster stared in a certain direction from high up in the sky. Suddenly, it swung its tail with a whoosh. Then, the huge silhouette suddenly disappeared. The next second after it disappeared, its figure appeared above the forest on the outskirts of the barren land. As soon as it appeared there, its huge figure blocked the light, and the area below became pitch black. The level 9 monster lowered its head and looked around. Suddenly, it opened its mouth and pointed at a spot on the ground. Following that, a rainbow light shot out from its mouth, illuminating the area within a radius of tens of meters. Ka ka ka. After it shone the light in its mouth for a few seconds, the plants on the ground instantly withered. Then, the withered branches fell to the ground and immediately broke into the same soil as the ground. After these plants had all withered and turned into soil, the ground immediately sank down with a few muffled sounds. Roar! Then, there was a sudden roar from the ground. Then, a level 8 monster suddenly rushed out from the ground. After the monster rushed out, it did not rush to fight the level 9 monster. Instead, it turned around and ran. However, before it could rush a meter away, it was suddenly slapped to the ground by a claw from the sky and pinned to the ground. Roar! The level 8 monster with horns all over its body was pressed down. It only had time to raise its head and roar in despair. In the next second, it was immediately bitten down by a big mouth. Gotcha! The level 9 monster's body was 3 to 4 times the size of the level 8 monster. Of course, its head was also bigger than the level 8 monster. So with one bite, the level 8 monster's entire head and neck were bitten open. The monster's blood splattered everywhere and dripped on the surrounding plants, immediately melting them. However, the level 9 monster chewed with relish and swallowed it in a few bites. Then it lowered its head and bit off the rest of the head. After eating, it used its claws to grab the prey's entire body and put the neck into its mouth, then began to suck. What Lin Xiao said earlier was not wrong. A level 8 monster that was dozens of meters long was not enough to fill its stomach. The level 8 monster, which had horns all over its body and looked like a giant lizard, was quickly drained of its blood by the level 9 monster. Then he began to chomp down on the food. Lin Xiao, who originally wanted to see the level 9 monster eat, missed the scene she wanted to see. Lin Xiao felt like she was trapped in a dark place. She was not standing but lying down. However, she didn't feel anything lying on the ground. Without anything to support her, she felt like she was floating in the air. She struggled to move her hands and feet, but found that because there was no support under her body, she couldn't even control her body. However, she had a premonition that she had to stand up as soon as possible. Otherwise, she might regret the consequences. So she tried to control her body to turn over, but at this moment, something seemed to surge out from the dark, then stuck to her body and pulled her down. At this time, Lin Xiao's body, which was Lu Tianyu's body, stood in front of the small building. She moved her 10 fingers. Her back was arched, her legs were bent in an O shape, and her long hair was messily hanging down. Just as Lin Xiao began to struggle in the darkness, she suddenly held her head with both hands. Then, a low and deep roar came from her mouth. Hoo-hoo! Hoo! The more Lin Xiao struggled in the darkness, the louder the roar from Lu Tianyu's body. Hoo-hoo! Roar! At this time, Lu Tianyu's body's movements and actions were completely like an ordinary zombie that had just evolved to level 2. She instinctively held her head and roared again and again, and her body uncontrollably squatted down again. Her hands were still holding her head. Just as she squatted down with her head in her hands, her breathing began to become chaotic again. At this time, Lin Xiao had slowly begun to get used to what was going on in this dark space, and the invisible things that stuck to her and wanted to pull her down should be the spiritual power of Lu Tianyu, who had turned into a zombie. After feeling that the other party's pulling force was not very strong, Lin Xiao immediately concentrated and struggled to stand up again. She also found that as long as she concentrated, her movements seemed to be smoother. Lin Xiao used all her strength to slowly stand up, and then gradually found that the darkness in front of her was slowly receding. Then her whole body suddenly shook, her eyes lit up, and she saw the scene in front of her clearly. She put down her hands that were holding her head and looked down at her nails. With a thought, she retracted all her nails. Lin Xiao breathed a sigh of relief, then raised her hand and pushed the scattered hair on her face to the back of her head. Then she looked around. She found that she was still in her own space. The zombies around her who were standing still felt the pressure on their bodies ease up, but they stared at Lin Xiao with some lingering fear and took a few steps back. Lin Xiao glanced at them and didn't say anything. Then she narrowed her eyes and looked outside. When she looked outside from the space, her field of vision was not very far. So she was still in the barren environment when she entered the space before. In this situation, she could only flash outside to explore the distance. Thinking of this, Lin Xiao opened her eyes. The darkness in her eyes slowly receded, and the black lines at the corner of her eyes disappeared. After taking a few deep breaths, Lin Xiao finally subdued the messy energy in her body. Then she flashed and disappeared from the space. When she came out of the space, Lin Xiao immediately felt the strong aura of a level 9 beast that seemed to be able to be sensed no matter where she was in this underground space. Lin Xiao immediately rushed in the direction of the level 9 creature. As she got closer and closer, she finally found that the other party's aura was contaminated with the aura of other creatures. That aura was level 8. There was also a strong smell of blood. That guy was eating, but she didn't know how many it had eaten. There was only a smell on its body. It seemed like it had only eaten one. As she got closer and closer to the level 9 creature, Lin Xiao felt more and more pressure. At this moment, the other party suddenly began to move, and in an instant, it suddenly went in another direction. Lin Xiao was stunned. She didn't directly chase after the other party, but first went to the place where it was eating. Looking at the big hole there were some monster limbs beside it, and the smell of blood everywhere. Lin Xiao knew that it was eaten just now. Huh? Didn't this guy grab its prey and drag it back to its nest to eat? Why did it eat it here? Chapter 1353. After looking at the remains left behind by the level 9 creature, Lin Xiao leaped onto a tree and carefully sensed the level 9 creature's movements. Soon, she found out why the level 9 creature did not drag the prey back to the cave. It was because it was still hunting. Roar, bang bang. A roar and some tremors came from the other side. Another level 8 subterranean beast was dragged out by it. The two energies collided a few times, but they quickly calmed down. Lin Xiao stomped her feet and leaped over there. Her transparent figure flew over the top of the thicket and quickly approached the level 9 creature. Although she didn't see the battle with her own eyes, she could guess that the 8th tier subterranean exotic beast couldn't last more than 3 moves against the 9th tier subterranean exotic beast based on the changes in the collision of the two auras. When Lin Xiao approached, she saw a familiar bloody scene from afar. The huge beast's claws were pressing down on another subterranean beast that was much smaller than it. The beast lowered its head and opened its mouth wide, tearing at the prey under its claws. She finally saw the creature's true appearance. Why did the subterranean beasts get bigger the higher the level? This monster was at least a few hundred meters long and tens of meters tall. It had the appearance of a prehistoric giant beast. She had never seen such an appearance before. Fortunately, it wasn't like the big fish from before, which had a mushroom-shaped head. This guy looked quite formidable. His 4 strong limbs were covered with bone spurs, and he had 2 short horns on his head. From the back of his head all the way to his back, his entire spine was covered with spikes that pointed towards the sky. Rows of spikes also grew out from its tail. There were also 2 spikes at the corners of its 2 huge eyes. From afar, it looked a bit like its tail eyelashes. It had a long and sharp mouth shape, and it could open very wide. Its mouth was full of blood and dirt. This was the scene of a beast eating. It was considered common in the post-apocalyptic world. However, this creature was too big, and the scene was indeed a bit scary. Lin Xiao quietly leaned over and clearly saw this guy burying its head and chewing for a while. After a while, this guy finished eating a prey that was half its size. Then, after finishing his meal, he stood up and raised one of his claws to lick it. Suddenly, he leaped into the air and disappeared in the blink of an eye. After Lin Xiao raised his head and watched it disappear, he suddenly twisted his face and looked in another direction. He couldn't help but reveal a confused expression. Lin Xiao was able to capture the direction in which it disappeared. But this guy wasn't heading back to his nest. Instead, he was heading in another direction. Lin Xiao thought to himself, this guy isn't full yet. He had to continue catching them. Moreover, looking at the current situation, whoever it set its eyes on would not be able to escape. It was as if this was the prey in its own yard, and it could catch it whenever it wanted. As he continued to observe, the big guy caught one prey after another and started eating on the spot. Behind him, Lin Xiao silently counted how big this guy's appetite was and how many he would eat. Until it ate the 13th one, it stopped. Lin Xiao watched as it bit the last prey to death, but it didn't continue eating like the previous ones. Instead, it picked up the prey's corpse and leaped into the air before flying back to its nest. This time, it flew much slower than before. Previously, it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Now, it was like taking a stroll after eating its fill. It actually ate more than a dozen level 8 creatures for a meal. Its appetite was indeed terrifying. If it were to reach the surface, wouldn't it starve to death? Because there weren't as many level 8 mutated beasts on the surface. Sikong Chun said expressionlessly, no matter what, let them try all the methods as soon as possible. We don't have much time to wait. Wei Haichao immediately looked up at him and asked, why? Are you preparing to start the plan? Chapter 1354. Sikong Chun turned to the back of his chair and looked at him. Professor Bai's been in a bad mood these days, so he didn't object when I suggested this. Looking at his current state, he shouldn't be in the mood to care about this matter. Wei Haichao asked him, when are you going to start? Sikong Chun said, let's see the news from the underground first. I didn't expect that woman, Xiaolong Yun, to be killed so quickly. I thought she would be of some use. She wasted such a precious medicine. As he spoke, he showed a somewhat disdainful look. Wei Haichao looked at him and was silent for 2 seconds before saying, weren't you also very confident at the beginning? Why did you announce your failure so quickly? This slap in the face was also very quick. Sikong Chun glanced at him. Logically speaking, with her special skills, she couldn't have died even if she couldn't kill that woman. I don't know what happened to her. Maybe it was an accident. We don't know the situation underground, but Professor Bai said that the situation down there isn't a place that humans like us can go casually. Wei Haichao nodded and didn't say anything else. On the other side, Li Zheng and the other 2 returned to the ground safely. They finally saw the sunlight, and the 3 of them heaved a sigh of relief. There were a few groups of people guarding the entrance. When they saw Li Zheng and the other 2 come out, they immediately rushed over. When they saw Li Zheng and the other 2 come out, they immediately stared at him. Li Zheng and the other 2 had just climbed out of the cave and stood on the ground for a few seconds. Suddenly, they stomped their feet and jumped up. Bang, bang, bang. A few gunshots came, and a few bullets hit the place where the 3 of them had been. Who is it? Li Zheng shouted, landing on a tree branch at the side. He stared coldly in the direction where the bullets came from. Don't go too far. We're still here. What do you want? At this time, another voice came. Li Zheng turned his head and looked at the second voice. He saw Xiao Liqing and his people appear over there. He immediately leaped towards them. No, we just want to invite this person back for a cup of tea. Another voice came at this time. It was obviously the people who had just fired. Li Zheng looked at those people and saw that it was Li Yuelong, one of the deputy leaders of Huaxia. It was as if they weren't the ones who had fired the gun just now. They spoke as if nothing had happened. Although he said that he wanted to invite him for tea, he just wanted to cut off the first batch of information that came from the underground. Not only did they want to get it first, but they also didn't want others to know about it. In a situation where everyone was present, they could still attack without any scruples. Obviously, he did not intend to pretend to be at peace with Sea City. Xiao Liqing sneered and said, sorry, they're on our side. Since you don't want to cooperate properly, then wait for your own people to bring the news up. We won't be sharing information. Goodbye. As they spoke, they prepared to leave with their men. However, the people from Huaxia would not let them go so easily. Stop right there. Since we're working together, of course we have the right to know this information. You don't have the right to monopolize this information. Li Yuelong waved his hand, and his men immediately blocked Xiao Liqing's way. Li Zheng said coldly. What do you mean by moving together? Why don't I know? When we went down, we said that we'll act separately. What does that have to do with you? As he said that, he turned to Xiao Liqing and said, Let's go. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At this time, the people from Huaxia suddenly pulled out their guns and aimed at them. They had no intention of letting them go. No one can leave today. Since you're not willing to follow us obediently, then we can only make it so that you can't go anywhere. But I still advise you to follow us quietly. Otherwise, if we fight, you'll only be at a disadvantage. Isn't that right? Li Welong said coldly. He himself was not a level 7 arcanist, but a level 6. But he had a lot of people now. Just as he blocked Xiao Liqing's way, there were already dozens of level 4 and level 5 arcanists. And behind him stood a group of people. Although Xiao Liqing also brought dozens of people, the number of arcanists he had was not as high as the other side, and their levels were not high. If they really fought with Huaxia's protective equipment, weapons, and arcanists, Sea City would indeed be at a disadvantage. However, Xiao Liqing and Li Zheng were not worried about this. They looked at each other. And calmly said to Li Welong, You people from Huaxia really do whatever you want. Do you really think we'll be afraid of you? Seeing that the two sides were getting more and more angry, it seemed like they were about to fight. Suddenly, a female voice came from the side and said, Hey, what's going on? Huaxia, it's not that I want to criticize you. You people really want to solve problems with guns at every turn. You're very confident in your weapons. Both sides turned their heads and saw a girl with long, wavy hair and a baby face standing on a tree on the other side. She had one hand on her waist and the other on the tree trunk. She looked at the people from Huaxia and said disdainfully. Behind her, a row of people also flashed and stood not far away, each of them wearing sunglasses so that people could not see their faces clearly. I thought that your Qingshan base was going to wait until we started to fight before showing up. Isn't it a little too hasty to come out now? After Li Welong saw Yi Yingwei, he first looked at her face and body twice, then raised a hint of a smile with unknown meaning. Yi Yingwei shrugged and said angrily, You should thank me for coming out to stop you. Otherwise, you people would be out of luck, you know? The strong disdain in her tone immediately made Li Yuelong's face sink. He stared at her gloomily and said, Bad girl, are you looking down on us from Huaxia? Yi Yingwei looked at him with a confused face and said, What? Is your Huaxia very powerful? Oh, not bad. You do have a lot of people. Yeah, you're right. We have a lot of people. I think you want to see what happens if you dare to provoke us, so I'll let you have a try. Li Welong stared at her gloomily and then waved his hand. The people behind him instantly turned the guns in their hands and shot at Yi Yingwei and the others. Bang, bang, bang. A series of gunshots rang out, and they moved. Those people from Huaxia who were blocking Xiao Liqing and the others immediately pulled the trigger at the same time. And Xiao Liqing and the others quickly reacted and jumped away from where they were. At this time, two figures flashed over from afar. They stood on a hill not far from the underground entrance and watched the battle from a distance. Chapter 1355. Two figures, one black and one white, stood at the side. The woman in the white dress had long black hair and a pair of beautiful eyes that were dyed black. The man beside her was extraordinarily handsome. His mouth was curled up into a faint smirk. His demonic aura was overflowing. That's right, it was Mo Yin who appeared with his loyal female subordinate. Currently, he was still at rank 6 and had yet to return to rank 7. However, he was currently on the verge of breaking through to rank 7 and would break through soon. This was because he had cultivated in Lin Xiao space for a period of time and drank a lot of lake water from Lin Xiao space every day. Therefore, his recovery had been relatively smooth. Otherwise, he would not have been able to reach rank 6 so quickly in such a short period of time. Of course, the beautiful zombie beside him had also helped him a lot in the beginning. She helped him hunt for zombie nuclei, but because he did not have many lightning element nuclei, he could not quickly digest the energy of other elements. Therefore, the beautiful zombie also helped him find a lot of mutant plant energy nuclei because the energy inside the mutant plant energy nuclei was easier to absorb. Mo Yin stood far away and observed the situation of the battle. The people from Huaxiao obviously had the advantage in numbers. They attacked directly in such a blatant manner. It seems like they no longer wanted to pretend to be at peace with Haicheng or sentient base. They had already shed all pretense of cordiality. However, even if the Chinese side had a lot of people, and all of them were metahumans with high defensive equipment, although Xiao Liqing's group was having a hard time dealing with the Chinese side, they were not completely defeated. This was because Xiao Liqing's people were very agile and dodging, and there was also a special team protecting the low-level and ordinary people of Haicheng. This team was naturally the people from sentient base. They relied on the instincts of zombies and their high levels. Therefore, they were able to easily dodge the bullets fired by the Chinese side. The Chinese side had been using new weapons and did not use their abilities to attack. Xiao Liqing knew that they were actually showing off how powerful the Chinese weapons were, allowing them to deal with their opponents without using their abilities. They wanted to use this to show how strong the Chinese army was. At the same time, they could use their weapons to exhaust the enemy's abilities. By the time their weapons were exhausted, the energy of the enemy's abilities would have been depleted. In this way, they would have a great chance of winning if they used their abilities to deal with the other party. Because even if it was just dodging and dodging, the ability users still needed to use their ability energy to operate. Just when Li Weilong was feeling smug, thinking that it wouldn't be a problem for them to deal with the people from the other three bases combined, Xiao Liqing suddenly shouted to his surroundings, "Don't wait to watch the show. Come out and deal with them quickly so that you can report back." His shout startled the people of Huaxia. Li Weilong immediately paused and looked around vigilantly. However, he didn't sense anything, so he thought that Xiao Liqing was bluffing. He snorted disdainfully, "Humph, what's wrong? Who is he trying to scare? Let's see who you can really call out." However, at this moment, a huge fireball suddenly appeared from the side and smashed towards them. The energy contained in the fireball was very powerful, and it was a power that could only be created by a rank 7 arcanist. It was obvious that the person who suddenly threw the fireball was a rank 7 arcanist. I hate people like you who think you're infallible the most. You don't even understand the situation when you look down on others. A delicate and slightly hoarse voice was heard, and a white figure flashed out. At the same time, the white figure was accompanied by a big black panther that was about 3 to 4 meters long. The black panther was like a black shadow, following beside the girl with 2 long ponytails that were as long as ribbons. The girl happened to be wearing a white dress, and the combination of black and white was very eye-catching. Boom! Before Li Weilong and the others could see what was going on with the 2 people who had just appeared, the huge fireball suddenly spun at a high speed and exploded. The energy from the explosion of the fireball was suddenly released, and it immediately radiated in all directions. Then a strong wind blade quickly shot out from the location where the fireball exploded, shooting in all directions. At the same time, the people of Haicheng and even the people of Qingshan base seemed to have received a signal at the same time, and in an instant, all of them flashed and retreated far away. By the time their enemies reacted, the fireball had already exploded. Because Haicheng and Qingshan base knew that Lin Xiao would send a group of people out in the next 2 days, they also guessed the actions of Huaxia. Thus, he sent out 2 experts to assist him. Lin Kuei's pair of sharp eyes, like that of a black panther, looked at the people of Huaxia very coldly. He did not forget what the people of Qingshan base did to him after they captured him. So he only appeared beside Qiu Lily for a few seconds, and then suddenly disappeared on the spot. Soon, in the next second, he flashed behind a Huaxia arcanist. The other party had just noticed him, but did not have time to react. Lin Kuei slapped down with his claws. Bang! Although the combat suits of these arcanists had some protection against the energy of arcanists, they still could not withstand this kind of physical attack. In particular, the strength of Lin Kuei's claws could smash a stone that weighed a few tons, and if it landed on their bodies, no matter how powerful the combat suits were, the bones in their bodies would be crushed. The person did not even have time to scream before he was slapped into the wall and stuck. While the person's body continued to stick to the wall, Lin Kuei had already rushed over again and bit off the person's neck. Then, he casually spat and continued to attack the next person. Xiao Lili, on the other hand, chased after Li Yuelong and attacked him. Li Yuelong was only a level 6 arcanist. After being targeted by Xiao Lili, there was no way for him to escape. What made him even more desperate was that at this time, a group of people wearing camouflage combat uniforms suddenly appeared around him. The aura of these people was not lower than level 5, and they were all very strong arcanists. Originally, a few people from Huaxiao worked together to deal with a person from Haicheng or Qingshan base, but suddenly, the group of people brought by the twin-tailed girls suddenly broke the balance. However, before he could see the fate of his people, he was hit by a bunch of fireballs from Xiao Lili. These fireballs not only contained fire, but a large number of wind blades and cones were also shot out. When he dodged the fireballs, he could not avoid the fire blades. So soon, his body was cut by the wind blades, and then he was swept into Xiao Lili's fire tornado. Chapter 1356. With the addition of Xiao Lili and Lin Kuei, no matter how advanced the weapons of the Huaxia people were, they were slowly losing the ability to fight back. After getting rid of the Huaxia people, Xiao Lili and the others gathered together. If you guys want to gather information, please come back to the base with us, Xiao Lili said to Yi Yingyue as she looked at the people from the base. Yi Yingyue smiled and nodded. Yes, it's okay. We'll go with you. Thus, everyone went to the base. How was it? Did you guys find a place? As soon as they got in the car, the three of them were immediately bombarded with questions. We found the place. It's more than 11,000 kilometers below the surface. There is indeed a very large space. Before we came up, we didn't have a rough estimate of its size, Li Zheng replied casually. 10,000 kilometers below? You guys actually went so deep down? Is it dangerous? Xiao Liqing looked back at Li Zheng curiously from the front passenger seat. Li Zheng nodded. The air in that space is filled with poisonous energy. Normal people can't breathe normally, so they need to wear gas masks. However, our leader has a special helper who helped us solve a lot of problems. Helper? Xiao Liqing asked in confusion. Yes. Li Zheng didn't say much about it. He just wanted to let him know that there was such a thing. Xiao Liqing also didn't ask much. He only asked about other things. What kind of space is it? Li Zheng said. It's a very mysterious space. There are many plants growing underground that we have never seen or thought about. There is a layer of energy mist at the top of the space. Although the entire space was underground, it was covered in a layer of energy mist. Although the entire space is underground, it isn't completely dark. There is also a faint layer of light. Speaking of danger, there is indeed danger everywhere. Half of the plants we saw were aggressive mutated plants. Most of the mutated beasts down there are level 7 or 8, and they're very powerful. After hearing the information from Li Zheng and the other 2 level first kings, everyone had a preliminary understanding of the underground space. After returning to the base, Li Zheng and the other 2 wrote reports and drew all sorts of pictures. Then they reported what they saw underground to Lin Feng, Wu Qingyue, and the others. I didn't expect that big cat to go down with Xiao. When she heard that Xiao Lin had a little helper, Xiao Lili immediately guessed that it was the big cat. I still don't understand why that big cat would follow her. After hearing Xiao Lili's words, Wu Changyue, who had come with Tungting and Lingling, suddenly asked in confusion. Everyone present already knew that the big red cat liked to follow Lin Xiao around. Lin Feng thought for a while expressionlessly before suddenly saying, the main thing is, why did our leader allow it to continue following us? Is it because it has never attacked humans before? He felt that one of the reasons Lin Xiao had allowed the big cat to follow them was that the big cat from the underground was like a mutant and would not actively attack people. They weren't like the other underground creatures that would attack violently the moment they saw humans. However, Lin Feng believed that this was not the only reason why Lin Xiao asked it to follow him. Could it be that it was prepared for the situation she was in now? Hearing his words, The others exchanged glances with each other. However, they couldn't figure it out even after thinking for a while. As such, they turned their attention back to the underground space. There are actually level 7 and level 8 underworld creatures in this place. What if they suddenly come up one day? If they suddenly come up one day, it would be a huge problem. Looking at the current situation, Lin Feng was most worried that it would be troublesome if they discovered such a situation. That's not the most important thing. Based on the information and attitude given by your leader, according to the information and attitude your leader gave us, she is still investigating why these creatures came out. That means that there must be something even more troublesome than these level 7 and 8 underground beasts, Wu Changyue said, looking at Lin Feng with a smile. Lin Feng looked at him. Indeed, but we can't rule out the possibility that I mentioned. But why are there so many level 7 and 8 underground creatures, but they haven't come out? Or could it be that they only sent these low-level ones to scout out the situation on the surface? Wu Qingyue looked at Li Zheng and asked, "What does she mean by that?" Lin Xiao didn't let him say too much about the level 9 creature. Li Zheng thought for a while and said, "The leader didn't come to a conclusion, but she suspects that there's an extremely powerful level 9 controlling that space apart from these level 7 and 8 underground creatures." Wu Qingyue and the others turned to look at each other. Level 9? Is there really such a thing? Since there were so many level 8 beasts, it was normal for one of them to break through to level 9. However, after thinking about the characteristics of the underworld creatures, this level 9 creature should be unimaginably powerful. Li Zheng said, "She's just suspecting. Before she can confirm its existence, she doesn't intend to let everyone know too much. She doesn't intend to let everyone know too much, but she also wants to remind everyone that it's best to be mentally prepared. Perhaps when the next batch comes out, the information will be more detailed." Lin Feng said, "Huaxia didn't get the information they wanted this time. I reckon they'll definitely increase their forces to guard that place next time, especially when our people came out, but their people are nowhere to be seen. Sikong Chun will definitely want to know what happened to his people down there. Then he'll know that his plan failed again. Seems like Sikong Chun is going to be very angry," Wu Changyue said with a smile. Lin Feng asked him, "Is there any progress on Huaxia's side?" Wu Changyue shook his head. "I don't know what his big moves are, but only some small ones." Lin Feng nodded. "Recently, the underground creatures in various regions seem to be gathering together. I feel like something is going to happen." Elmar, who had been silent all this while, suddenly said, "Could it be related to the situation underground again?" "Perhaps, but the main thing now is to find out what they are gathering together for," Wu Qinghua said. "I hope the people we sent over can bring back some useful information," Elmar said with a sigh. She felt that there were too many things going on recently. After dealing with the annoying fellows in Huaxia, she received news that the underground creatures in various regions were gathering on a large scale. She didn't know what was going on. Chapter 1357. At this time, the underground beasts in various areas were gathering, and several types of underground creatures were biting and devouring each other. In fact, these underground beasts generally had a large appetite, and it wasn't just the level 9 beast in the underground space that had a large appetite. The low-level ones on the surface could also eat a lot of food and energy. At this time, they were all attacking each other like crazy because they were of different species. They only attacked other species, either biting each other to death or being bitten to death. And the strange thing was that they would only bite their prey to death, and the other beasts would not come over to attack them. At the edge of the chaotic battlefield stood a powerful level 7 to 8 subterranean exotic beast. They each guarded one side, quietly watching the group of underground beasts fighting in front of them. There were also their own kind among them, but they were not moved, and all of them stared quietly at that place, observing. The underground beasts of the same level were all biting each other, and after biting their opponents to death, they immediately tore each other's flesh on the spot and ate all of it. After eating the leftovers, they immediately began to look for the next beast that had no opponents and began to attack each other. They didn't have any abilities, although they relied on brute force to attack. But their flesh and blood were full of energy, and there was also an energy core in their brains. After killing their opponents, these underground beasts would immediately dig out their opponents' energy cores and swallow them, then start to eat their flesh. All these underground creatures did the same thing: kill their opponents, eat them, then continue to find opponents to kill and eat. This was a scene of mutual killing. A kilometer away, a group of people were hiding and observing the situation with long-range binoculars. After seeing the large area filled with killing each other, they couldn't help but reveal puzzled expressions. What's going on? Are they killing each other? Qin Xiaoai held the binoculars and observed for a while, then continued to observe while asking. Li Yueshan, who came with Haicheng, stood next to him and also held the binoculars in his hand. He said thoughtfully, "I feel like they are advancing. Look at those that have eaten their opponents. Their auras are rapidly strengthening." It was no wonder that these underground creatures had eaten a lot of things on the surface. Whether it was the energy cores of humans, mutated beasts, or mutated plants, there had been no signs of evolution. So they need to eat their own kind? Qin Xiaoai put down the binoculars and turned to look at him. Is that so? Yeah. You actually managed to observe their advancement? Li Yueshan nodded. Yes, we have done a special investigation and a long-term follow-up investigation. Although these things have been eating, they have not shown any signs of advancement. Qin Xiaoai raised her hand and touched her bald head, revealing a thoughtful expression. After thinking for a while, she said, "If it's really like what you've observed, then are they gathering together now to level up? In order to level up, we have to absorb the energy of the same kind that came out from underground. This method of leveling up is a little too..." He paused for a moment. Is it cruel? It was a little, but if that was the only way, then there was really no other way. After all, their existence doesn't conform to the laws of nature. Li Yueshan continued his words. In addition to the two of them, there were some other people standing beside them. This time, it was not only the representatives of the base who had come to observe the abnormal situation of the underground creatures. Several members of the corpse hunting group had also come to collect information. The March Corpse Hunting Group was led by Luo Yuanjun. He was a curious person, so he was in charge of collecting information in the group. As a corpse hunting group that had a close cooperation with the base, Luo Yuanjun did not avoid the people of the base. He even formed a team with them. At this time, he stood beside Qin Xiaoai and observed the situation in front of them. After hearing the conversation between Qin Xiaoai and Li Yueshan, he also revealed a look of understanding. However, what was the purpose of those high-grade, subterranean exotic beasts guarding the surroundings? They were all guarding the periphery of the promotion field. What do they want? Because the scale of the underground creatures gathering here was very large. There were at least 100,000 underground creatures gathered here. In order to level up as soon as possible, the high-level creatures would fight with those of the same level. It would be a waste of time if they fought with those of a lower level. However, it would take a lot of strength to kill an opponent of the same level as them. Right at this moment, a victor finally emerged from the first batch of level 6 exotic beasts that were fighting. An underground exotic beast covered in wounds stood in front of another dead level 6 underground exotic beast, raising its head high. It was a top-tier level 6 exotic beast that was about to advance in a level 7. After biting its opponent to death, it raised its head and opened its bloody mouth, letting out a loud roar. Then, it lowered its head and started devouring its opponent's flesh and blood. Like all the other underground beasts, it had a huge appetite and ate very quickly. Even if the surrounding subterranean beasts passed by it, they wouldn't attack it. After this level 6 exotic beast quickly finished eating its opponent's corpse, it even chewed up the bones and swallowed them. After it finished eating, it suddenly bent its limbs, lowered its body, and lowered its head. It straightened its neck and let out a low roar. Roar, look, that one looks like it's about to advance. Luo Yuanjun was the first to notice the situation of the level 6 underground beast. He immediately spoke up subconsciously. After taking a closer look, The strongest of the underground beasts that were fighting each other were no higher than level 6. The level 7 exotic beasts were standing at the edge of the battlefield, watching them silently. Hearing Luo Yuanjun's words, the others looked over curiously. "Where is it?" Luo Yuanjun said, "The west side." Then everyone turned their gazes in that direction and started searching. As expected, it didn't take long before they saw a level 6 underground beast that was behaving strangely. The exotic beast was lowering its body, baring its fangs, and roaring in a low voice. After roaring for a while, it started trembling all over, and the trembling became more and more intense. A wave of energy was emitted from its body, spreading around it. The surrounding underworld creatures were forced to retreat. The surrounding underground beasts were forced to scatter. After pulling away to a certain distance, they started fighting again. The situation of this level 6 underground beast immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding high-level underground beasts. Chapter 1358. The level 8 and 7 subterranean exotic beasts on the outskirts were all staring at the mutated level 6 subterranean exotic beast. At the same time, their auras were also undergoing minute changes. If they were said to be calm, and there weren't any abnormalities earlier, they were now retracting their auras and concealing themselves. If ordinary beasts or humans purposely retracted their auras and hid their existence, they were either preparing to hunt or preparing to do something else. However, they didn't make a move immediately. It seemed like they were waiting for something. The other high-grade subterranean exotic beasts are retracting their auras. They are preparing to make a move. The spectators from afar also noticed the changes in the high-grade exotic beasts. But they seem to be waiting for an opportunity. What are they waiting for? Are they waiting for the result of the advancing level 6 exotic beast advancement? Perhaps that's the case. Perhaps there's something else going on. Everyone started guessing the various possibilities regarding this situation. While the humans at the base were observing the situation, the high-grade subterranean exotic beasts were watching the exotic beasts slaughtering each other, seemingly waiting for an opportunity to appear. Qian Xiaowai and the others vaguely felt that there wouldn't be any sudden developments so soon, but they were sure something special would appear later on. Sure enough, they waited for 3 to 4 days. Before the first subterranean exotic beast succeeded in advancing to level 6, other exotic beasts appeared. Their levels varied, ranging from level 6 to level 3 or 4, and so on. The high-grade subterranean exotic beasts were finally no longer watching quietly from the sidelines because they were starting to take action. For example, a level 4 subterranean exotic beast was in the process of advancing, and a level 5 subterranean exotic beast suddenly appeared from the side to attack it. At that moment, one of the level 7 and 8 exotic beasts watching from the outskirts suddenly leaped down, instantly pouncing at the level 5 subterranean exotic beast that was preparing to ambush it. The moment the level 5 exotic beast made its move, it attracted the attention of the other high-grade subterranean exotic beasts. As such, with a difference of 2 levels, the speed, strength, and precise reactions of a level 7 subterranean exotic beast were much stronger than a level 5 subterranean exotic beast. Before the level 5 ambush could succeed, the high-tier subterranean exotic beast pounced on him and pressed him under its claws, biting him to death before he could react. Just like that, the level 7 subterranean exotic beast that was bitten to death didn't eat it. Instead, it left it there and turned to leave. Very soon, this level 5 subterranean exotic beast would be picked up by the other exotic beasts that had no opponents yet and eaten it. From this, it could be seen that the high-grade subterranean exotic beasts seemed to be doing their job of maintaining order. Of course, they probably didn't just come here for this. There might be other things. While the humans were guessing the intentions of the high-level underworld creatures, a level advancement creature finally appeared. That piece of land was already covered in desolation and had been destroyed to the point of being in a complete mess. The thick smell of blood permeated the air, and the roars of the beasts were still noisy and crisscrossed. The one that had advanced wasn't the first level 6 subterranean exotic beast, but a level 5. It successfully advanced to level 6. Its aura suddenly grew stronger, and its body began to stretch and grow larger amidst a wave of cracking sounds. Soon, it entered the ranks of the level 6 subterranean exotic beasts. However, it didn't continue to join in the slaughter. Instead, it turned around and quickly left the area. The high-grade exotic beast didn't stop it, either, and left with it. However, after the other level 5 subterranean exotic beast failed to advance, its aura turned chaotic and it couldn't control itself. Following that, the energy in its body began to contract and expand, contracting and expanding. This meant that its advancement had failed. What would happen next was an energy explosion, followed by death. The energy explosion wouldn't blow up their entire bodies, but it would deform them a little. After this level 5 subterranean exotic beast failed to advance, the surrounding level 5 and 6 subterranean exotic beasts that had been waiting for an opportunity immediately rushed up. Another round of chaos couldn't be avoided, no matter who came first. However, such a situation was allowed. The high-grade subterranean exotic beasts wouldn't appear to stop them. However, when a level 6 subterranean creature failed to advance, the surrounding subterranean creatures didn't dare to rush up to snatch it. In any case, they wouldn't be able to snatch it even if they rushed up, because there would be a level 7 subterranean exotic beast faster than them. The surrounding level 7 subterranean exotic beasts seemed to be waiting for this moment, while the level 8 subterranean exotic beasts didn't make a move. However, there weren't many level 8 subterranean exotic beasts here, only a tenth of the level 7 subterranean exotic beasts. The level 6 subterranean exotic beasts that successfully advanced to level 7 didn't leave like the level 5 subterranean exotic beasts that advanced to level 6. They would flash to the edge of the battlefield and continue watching. Doesn't that mean they can only advance to level 7 at most? Don't these level 7 subterranean exotic beasts advance using the same method as the others? Luo Yuanjun asked doubtfully after watching for a few days. Maybe level 7 is a special level, and it'll change to another method to advance. But this method is definitely the same as killing each other. After all, even if they eat a level 7 or 8 mutated beast on the surface, they won't advance, Li Weishan said from the side. Is this considered internal consumption? I thought these things had no natural enemies and would continue wreaking havoc on Earth's surface like this. In less than 10 years, the entire Earth will become a dead planet. Qian Shao AI said with some emotion. Although their base in Haiqing had recently been researching a type of herb that was very effective against these subterranean creatures, with a number of these darn things, even if humans had an effective herb against them, it would take decades to eliminate all of them. After a few decades, who knew how many mutated plants, mutated beasts, zombies, and so on would be left on Earth? After considering the future of the entire Earth, the appearance of these things was even more terrifying than the zombies that not only ate humans but also their own kind. After all, zombies only ate humans, they wouldn't eat plants. If even plants were gone, then the various food chains on Earth would only enter a broken state. If this continued for a long time, wouldn't Earth really be finished? Chapter 1359. Even in the apocalypse, the laws of nature haven't changed. Li Yushan nodded. I wonder when this promotion battle will end. Luo Yuanjun muttered to himself as he picked up his binoculars and began observing the battlefield through his binoculars. After a few days of killing, some of them managed to level up after eating the flesh of several underground exotic beasts. Some of them killed others and were bitten to death by others. There were also some who were lucky enough to level up after eating just one. Therefore, the number of subterranean exotic beasts had obviously decreased by more than half. Some of them died, while the ones that failed to advance also died. Only those that succeeded were able to leave. The remaining ones continued to kill, either dying or advancing. With such a method of death, there wouldn't be many left alive. Aren't they afraid that their own kind will become fewer and fewer and become extinct? Qin Xiao AI couldn't help but ask. Their reproduction speed isn't considered slow. In fact, it's considered very fast. It's just that their level is relatively slow. Also, look, the lowest level here is only level 3. There aren't any that are below level 3. Therefore, these subterranean exotic beasts are still holding back. Liu Shan answered Qin Xiao AI's question. Qin Xiao AI nodded. If that's the case, they are indeed holding back a way out. Liu Shan said, we should also send the news back. But no matter what, this situation is considered good news for us. At least with them gathered together, we might be able to catch them all in one fell swoop. Then, they sent people back to the base with the information they had seen in the past few days. After reading the information, Lin Feng, Wu Chengyue, and the others revealed complicated expressions. Although their advancement method is very costly, it's very efficient. Moreover, their level is getting higher and higher. There are already so many level 8 exotic beasts here, and there's still a bunch of level 8 exotic beasts underground. If 1 or 2 of these level 8 exotic beasts attack our base, we won't be able to defend at all. Lin Feng frowned slightly and thought for a while before sighing. The others also nodded in agreement with slightly gloomy faces. I just don't know how often this kind of advancement scene will happen. Chen Yuding stared at the information and said, just as they were having a meeting in the conference room, there was a sudden rush of footsteps outside the door. Li Jing took a piece of paper and walked to the door. He looked at the leaders in the room and knocked lightly on the door. An urgent report from Huaxia. Everyone immediately turned to look at him. Urgent report? Lin Feng's expression turned serious. That's right. Otherwise, Li Jing wouldn't have knocked on the door while the meeting was still in progress. What's going on? What did China do? Wu Qingyue asked. Li Jing walked in with the information in his hands. As he walked, he said, he blew up the nearest gathering point of the underground beast from Huaxia with a missile. Not only that, this missile contains a special substance, causing the subterranean exotic beasts around it to all die. He's dead. Everyone immediately showed a surprised expression. Even missiles wouldn't be able to kill them all so easily. Moreover, there were also level 7 and 8 subterranean beasts nearby. They definitely wouldn't die. Just their defense alone was already very strong. Even if the missiles could kill them, they would only be able to kill the low-level ones that were closest to the explosion zone. Those at level 5 and above would probably be fine. But Li Zheng said that they were all dead. And there was another important factor. There was a special substance in the missile. Li Zheng nodded with a serious expression and said, I've confirmed it again and again. Other than the higher-level ones at the periphery that ran away, the ones in the center are all dead. It doesn't seem like they were killed by the explosion. It seems like they were poisoned to death. That's because after the missile exploded, a substance in the form of a mist was released. Back then, Huaxia fired dozens of these missiles and blew up the entire group of exotic beasts. Dozens of missiles? Huaxia already had a way to deal with these subterranean creatures, but they still had to gather all the bases to discuss it. It seems like Xikong Chun had planned this. The smile on Wu Qingyue's face disappeared. He narrowed his eyes expressionlessly. They had already created dozens of missiles. It was obvious that they had a research plan a long time ago. In the end, they still gathered the leaders of all the bases in the name of dealing with the subterranean creatures. Xikong Chen's motive for doing this was definitely not simple. The other party had hidden this secret very well. They had never heard anything about it before. Now that they had suddenly released it, Huaxia was indeed starting to expose their ambitions. I think he must have done something secretly when he gathered the leaders of all the bases to Huaxia. However, when Qing Shan suggested going underground, he must have guessed that either you or a leader would go down. So he changed the plan. That's why they changed the proposal, Lin Feng said with a straight face. Even if Xikong Chun changed the plan, he still hadn't stopped his actions. Who would have thought that they would suddenly make such a big move now? What does he mean by revealing his trump card now? Elmar and the others, who had been listening at the side, asked in puzzlement. Wu Chengyue said, the underworld creatures are the most dangerous. Since they have such an effective weapon, they should be able to deal with them. Since they have such an effective weapon, the survival of mankind will be in their hands again. When that time comes, we only have two choices. When facing those creatures, should we deal with them ourselves or choose to use their weapons? As soon as he said this, everyone understood. If they dealt with them themselves, they wouldn't have such an effective weapon. They would only suffer heavy losses. If they wanted to use their weapons, the condition would be for them to do it. They had to agree to whatever the other party wanted. Moreover, the timing was very good. It was when the subterranean creatures were gathering. Killing a large number of them at once would not only be obvious, but it would also shock others. Elmar's delicate face darkened when she heard that. Does Seekong-chan really think that they're the only ones who can deal with these subterranean creatures? But speaking of which, they actually found something to deal with those subterranean creatures. Do you know what it is? Li Zheng shook his head. Although we have collected some of this substance and handed it over to Lung Xuantong's research center for them to research, we didn't know what it was. As for what it is, it depends on the research center's progress. But I still feel that Huaxia discovered this too early. These subterranean creatures haven't been around for a long time, but we don't know when they started creating missiles. Chapter 1360. With this kind of weapon, they want all the bases to submit to them. Only by submitting to them can they obtain their protection. Wu Qingyue's lips curled into a smile, but there wasn't a trace of a smile in his eyes. I don't think it's that simple. Since they only want all the bases to submit to them, they could have revealed it earlier. There's no need to wait until now. Lin Kuei, who was relatively quiet, spoke up. Everyone looked at him. Wu Qingyue and Lin Feng lowered their eyes slightly, revealing a thoughtful expression. Qiu Lily stood by the window and looked back at them in confusion. What else does he want to do? The others looked at each other, unable to guess what Seekong-chan wanted to do. Lin Xiao, who was in the underground space, watched the level 9 subterranean exotic beast return to its nest. She then left quietly and circled back to the spatial entrance. Duan Wan and the others waited for the commotion caused by the level 9 exotic beast to gradually calm down from the cave entrance, before they all heaved a sigh of relief. After the level 9 exotic beast's torment, the underground space became even quieter. After Lin Xiao returned successfully, she saw that everyone was present and said, "It went back to rest after eating its fill. But with its appetite, it's a miracle that it hasn't gone extinct in this underground space." The others didn't go near because the level 9 exotic beast's aura was too strong. They weren't too clear about its hunting from afar. When they saw Lin Xiao return, they all looked at her curiously and expectantly. "How much did it eat this time?" Lin Xiao replied, 12, all of them level 8. After it finished eating, it caught another one and brought it back to its nest for a sumptuous meal. When everyone heard this, they all revealed a shocked expression. 12 of them, and all of them were level 8. Level 8 exotic beasts were so rare on the surface. Why were they so worthless in this underground space? Lin Xiao was right. It ate so much in one meal. How long does it need to eat? Hasn't it finished yet? It really can eat. It's exactly the same as the ones above. What should we do next? Continue to keep an eye on it? Kong Qingming sighed and asked Lin Xiao. Their mission was to scout out the situation, even though their main mission was to figure out why the underworld creatures had appeared. Now that they had come down and found the nest of those things, they also had a preliminary answer to the appearance of those things on the surface. The answer was naturally that those on the ground had been driven out by this rank 9 fellow. However, it was still unclear why this level 9 exotic beast was chasing those low-level exotic beasts away. But it seemed that they wouldn't know the answer in a short period of time, unless they stayed here to observe it for a long time. Lin Xiao thought about it. It was fine for her to continue staying here. However, this level 9 exotic beast obviously wouldn't climb to the surface so quickly. So, if she stayed behind, it would surely take a long time. However, she couldn't spend all her time here since she had already figured out the situation here. In that case, he'd let the others stay behind and observe from afar. As long as they didn't get too close to the level 9 exotic beast, it wouldn't take a fancy to them. Xiedong, I'll leave the 2ND Division's men behind for you. You guys continue observing this level 9 exotic beast from afar and see when it will come out to hunt again. I'll bring the others back to the surface first. You guys act according to the situation. If it's safe, continue to observe. If it's not safe, quickly retreat. Lin Xiao looked at Xiedong and ordered. The zombies she brought from the second base's army also had wind element zombies. There were 1 and 2 others following Xiedong. If she asked them to fly up with just one person, they should be able to do it. Therefore, Lin Xiao didn't plan to leave too many people behind. She only left Xiedong, who was a level 7 and level 2 king, and 4 level 1 kings. Xiedong's wind element subordinate was only a level 5 king. Yes, Xiedong and the other members of the zombie army that Lin Xiao pointed out nodded and responded. What are your plans? She looked at Qingshan bases, Leicheng, and Ocean Cities, Kong Qingming, and the others. Leicheng and Kong Qingming looked at each other. Let's go back and report the situation first. We'll wait for the higher-ups to decide. Kong Qingming frowned and said. Leicheng glanced at him, then turned to Lin Xiao and nodded. Me too. Lin Xiao glanced at the two of them and said, Okay, since you guys want to go up, it's not good to leave too many people here. Xiedong and the others should stay behind and observe that fellow's movements. Anyway, if that level 9 big guy came out to hunt again, it wouldn't be small. Therefore, as long as they observe from afar, they would be able to know the general situation. If they didn't get close, with Xiedong and the other's status as zombies, their lives wouldn't be in danger. Lin Xiao looked back at the direction of the level 9 beast, then threw everyone except Xiedong and the others into the space. Then she walked out of the cave and shouted, Come out, it's time to go back. Arf woof, a dog's bark came from the forest in front of them. Then they heard a whistling sound in the air. Wang, Dahe, and the others also came out and ran in front of Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao threw the 3 of them into the space one by one, then looked left and right, but didn't see Dahong. After looking for a while, Lin Xiao didn't see Dahong's figure, so she didn't care about it. This guy always came and went without a trace, so she couldn't see it now. Maybe it would follow them in a while. Lin Xiao didn't care about it anymore. She brought the others back to the cave they came from. In the space, Yuan Tianxing saw a large group of people being sent into the space by Lin Xiao. He couldn't help but ask, What's wrong? What's the situation now? He had seen Lin Xiao's strange situation before, but he knew it wasn't the time to ask about it. He saw that Lin Xiao recovered on her own, but he still had to ask her what was going on when he went back. We've seen the general situation. Now we need to go back and report the situation to the higher-ups, then wait for the higher-ups' decision. But we still left some people here to continue observing. Kong Qingming explained to him. Yuan Tianxing nodded and didn't say anything else. After Lin Xiao went up, it didn't take long for a red figure to rush over. It jumped up and also jumped out. Lin Xiao felt that not only did she have to deal with these underground creatures, but she also had to deal with the people in the Huaxiao base as soon as possible. Before the problem with her body flared up, she had to get rid of the biggest threat in Huaxia. This way, even if something happened to her and she temporarily left the base, Lin Feng would still be able to deal with other things. Even if Lin Feng couldn't deal with it, Wu Qingyue wouldn't just watch from the side. Chapter 1361. When Lin Xiao brought his people back to the surface, Xikong Shun from Huaxiao once again went to the secret research base outside the base. The group of people that came up this time ran back, but there's no news from our people at all. We don't know what's going on with your daughter, but I think if she's really like what you said, it must have something to do with that woman at the Universal Base. Xikong Shun sat on the sofa in Professor Bai's office, leaned against the back of the sofa, and looked up at Professor Bai. Professor Bai's face was full of wrinkles, and now he seemed to be a little older than before. His back was also a little more stiff, and his entire aura seemed to have quietened down. Hearing Xikong Chen's words, he sat motionlessly at the desk. He silently looked at Xie Longyun's photo on the table in front of him, and didn't make a sound. Sikong Chun looked at him and also became silent. After a moment of silence, Professor Bai finally said with his face down, "You seem to be doing things less and less like before. What's going on?" As soon as he said this, Sikong Chen's eyes darkened. His expression also darkened, and he immediately replied, "Professor Bai, don't you know my ability? It's just that the universal base is really difficult to deal with now, and it's not because of me. I'm already thinking of a way, and I'll definitely figure out their background before our operation really starts. Trust me." In the end, he sat up straight and looked at Professor Bai with a firm gaze. Professor Bai didn't look at him and still looked at the photo on the table without moving. A few seconds after Sikong Chen finished speaking, he said indifferently, "It's because I believe in your ability that I'm working with you. If your ability isn't as good as before, it's not a good thing for me. At least, I'm not going to change partners at this time." Sikong Chun looked at him seriously. "Don't worry, I won't give you the chance to change partners." At this time, in the Universal Base, outside the office of the Medical Center Director, Chung Wangshua walked over with Lin Xiaolu, carrying a lunchbox. At the same time, a female nurse walked over from the other side. When she saw Chung Wangshua, she immediately showed a happy expression. "Sai, sister-in-law Chung is here to deliver food to brother again. You have to quickly find a wife for our director so that she can deliver food. Don't you think it's too tiring to always trouble you?" The female nurse approached Chung Wangshua and joked with her. Lin Hao was indeed very troublesome. He was a bachelor and had no time to cook. It was impossible for him to have time to cook even if he stayed in the medical center all day. Often, he would go to Lin Feng's place to have a meal when he got off work. If he didn't get off work, he would starve. When they were busy until late at night, they would skip eating until the next day. In any case, the bodies of adepts were much better than those of ordinary people. Even if they did not eat, the energy in their bodies would be self-sufficient to supply some of the nutrients they needed. Of course, he couldn't go without food for a long time. Not only would his digestive system crash, but his mouth would also become bland. Although energy could provide some nutrients to the body, the feeling of hunger could not disappear. This was also very torturous. So sometimes, for the sake of their families, Chung Wangshua and Lin Wenwen would take turns to deliver food to Lin Hao. Hearing the nurse's words, Chung Wangshua only laughed heartily. "No, it's not hard at all. But you're right, we really need to find a wife for Lin Hao. It's just that he didn't take a fancy to one himself. We are also very anxious." This nurse was Lin Hao's assistant. She would often see Chung Wangshua and Lin Wenwen come over, so she became familiar with them. The female nurse, Lu Meiqing, held a few medical documents in her hand while opening the door to Lin Hao's office. She pushed it open and let Chung Wangshua enter first while she stood by the side. After the two of them entered, Lu Meiqing followed them in. There was no one in the office. When Chung Wangshua saw this, she said, "Is he busy again?" After Chung Wangshua brought Lin Xiaolu in, she placed the lunchbox in her hand directly on Lin Hao's desk. Lin Xiaolu obediently walked to the chair on the side and sat down. Lu Meiqing also placed the documents in her hand on other places on Lin Hao's desk and helped to tidy up Lin Hao's desk. While tidying up, she smiled and replied, "Yes, he is examining the patient. I'm afraid he will only be back a little later. Are you going to wait for him to eat before going back? Or are you going to put the food in?" Chung Wangshua smiled at her and said, "I don't have time to wait for him. I still have to go back. Just leave the food here. When he comes back from work and sees it, he will naturally eat it himself. Anyway, he will know that I brought it." Lu Meiqing nodded. "That's true." After saying that, she secretly glanced at the food for Lin Hao and then asked Chung Wangshua without batting an eyelid, "You have been quite busy recently. 2 days ago, it was Miss Wenwen who came to deliver food to the director, right?" Chung Wangshua smiled and nodded at her. "Indeed, a little. You guys have been delivering food to the director all the time. It has become a habit for him. Aren't you afraid that he will stay here and not go home?" After Lu Meiqing finished tidying up Lin Hao's desk, she stopped what she was doing and pretended to ask her casually. Chung Wangshua gently shook her head. "That won't happen. He is a person who knows his limits. He will still go back when it is time. Lu Meiqing's eyes darkened when she heard what she said. She quickly turned her head to hide her eyes, afraid that Cheng Wangxue would see it. Because she didn't get the information she wanted to know, she continued to say unwillingly, "Our director is a workaholic. When he goes home, he brings a pile of materials back to read." She said this because she didn't know whether Lin Hao would bring the materials home or not. That was why she said this, wanted to continue to get information from Cheng Wangxue. Although she was Lin Hao's assistant, there were still many things that Lin Hao didn't tell her. Even if she came here herself and searched, she also didn't find it. Of course, she didn't dare to get information from Lin Hao, but she had some confidence in getting information from Cheng Wangxue. She just didn't expect that Cheng Wangxue was not as easy to deal with as she thought. Cheng Wangxue smiled and said, "I'm not sure about that." "Well, the food has been delivered. We'll go back first. Xiaolu, let's go." Lin Xiaolu immediately turned her head to look at her, then stood up from the chair and walked towards her mother. However, when she raised her hand to hold Cheng Wangshue's hand, she casually glanced at Lu Meiqing. There was a hint of indecipherable meaning flashing in those pure eyes. Lu Meiqing didn't notice Lin Xiaolu's gaze. Seeing that Cheng Wangxue said that she was leaving, in order not to arouse suspicion, she quickly said that it was time to go out. Chapter 1362. After leaving Lin Hao's office, Cheng Wangxue and Lu Meiqing went their separate ways. When they separated, Lin Xiaolu, who was led by Cheng Wangxue, finally turned her head back and looked at Lu Meiqing. Then she turned back and looked up at Cheng Wangxue. "Mom, that person is a bad person." Lin Xiaolu raised her chin and suddenly said to Cheng Wangxue. Cheng Wangxue stopped and looked down at her daughter. She asked in confusion, "Why do you say that?" She knew that Lin Xiaolu said this for a reason, so Cheng Wangxue didn't doubt her daughter's words. She knew her daughter best, and Lin Xiaolu's ability was like a heart detector. She either wouldn't say it, or she wouldn't lie to her. Lin Xiaolu said, "She just wanted to know Aunt's secret, but she didn't want you all to know." Cheng Wangshue's expression immediately sank. She looked around, then pulled her daughter to the corner, squatted down, and asked Lin Xiaolu, "Xiaolu, is what you said true? Did that nurse want to know your aunt's secret? What else do you know?" Lin Xiaolu showed a thoughtful expression, then slowly said, "She wanted to tell Aunt's secret to others, and then let people bring the news out of our base." After Cheng Wangxue heard her daughter's words, she turned her face to the side slightly, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. Then she calmed down and continued to ask Lin Xiaolu, "You mean she also wanted to tell your aunt's secret to other people in the base?" This meant that the female nurse had many accomplices still lurking in the base. Lin Xiaolu nodded to her. "Yes, she also has a partner." Cheng Wangxue stood up and gently patted her head. "All right, Mom knows. Let's go back. I will tell your uncle." Lin Xiaolu nodded. "Okay." The two left. Cheng Wangshue's expression was as usual, but her eyes were much more dignified, and at the same time, there was a flash of light. Very good, when they were trying their best to guard against the outside. As expected, there were people in the base who wanted to betray and stab them in the back. After leaving the medical center, Cheng Wangxue did not immediately take Lin Xiaolu to the base government office building to find Lin Feng. She followed her usual routine and went home first, waiting for Lin Feng to come back. She didn't go to Lin Feng's office to tell him about this, because she didn't want to arouse the suspicion of the people lurking in the base. After all, she usually wouldn't go to the office building at this time. Since they were already keeping an eye on Lin Hao, they would definitely keep an eye on her, Lin Wenwen, and the others. Therefore, if she went to look for Lin Feng at this time, the person who was watching her might guess something and alert the enemy. Although he didn't know if someone was really watching him, there was nothing wrong with being vigilant. Moreover, Cheng Wangxue wasn't worried that the nurse would be able to immediately find any clues or information from Lin Hao within these few hours. He didn't know when she started searching for information around Lin Hao. Did she start from the beginning, or did she just start recently? But since she hadn't found what she wanted until now, she definitely wouldn't be able to find it in such a short period of time. In the evening, when Lin Feng finished his work and came back, he couldn't help but feel a little strange when he saw his wife, who was usually lying in bed at this time, sitting in the living room. And waiting for me? She definitely wouldn't sit in the living room all the time if there was nothing, so she must be waiting for him. Cheng Wangxue stood up and waited for him to close the door before walking in. Then she said to him, "When I brought Xiaolu to deliver food to Lin Hao today, Xiaolu said that the assistant nurse next to him was a spy and wanted to find out the secret of our leader from Lin Hao. Then she spread it to other bases. I guess she wanted to spread it to Huaxia. She should have a lot of companions." When Lin Feng heard this, he stopped in his tracks. He looked at Cheng Wangxue blankly and then became serious. "Are you sure?" Cheng Wangxue glared at him and said to him, "You don't believe what your daughter said?" Lin Feng walked to the sofa and sat down. "Tell me what's going on." Cheng Wangxue sat on the single sofa and said to him, "When I went to Lin Hao's office today, that female nurse also happened to appear. She went into the office with me and casually chatted with me. However, she didn't say much and quickly left Lin Hao's office with me. But after we came out, Xiaolu told me that what the female nurse said and what she was thinking didn't match. She seemed to be casually chatting with me, but in her heart, she was trying to trick me to find out where Lin Hao kept the leader's information. No wonder the nurse said that Lin Hao would take the information home after work. Actually, she didn't know if Lin Hao would take the information home, so she said that to test me. If I said yes or no, then it would be equivalent to giving her an answer. Luckily, what she said was a bit vague. Hearing that, Lin Feng's face also darkened. He said, "Is she still testing you?" The other party actually needed to test Lin Hao's information from other people. That meant that even if she was by Lin Hao's side, Lin Hao didn't believe her, so she couldn't get any useful clues from Lin Hao. It looked like her undercover work didn't have any progress. And seeing that she changed her method of finding information, it should be because the person behind her was anxious and wanted her to get clues as soon as possible. It looked like Huaxia had already made a move on many aspects, and the other party was probably going to make some big moves in the near future. After all, she had already used the weapons to deal with the underground creatures. She was indeed testing me. I didn't miss anything. How are you going to deal with this? Tell Lin Hao first. Cheng Wangxue looked at her and asked. Lin Feng frowned and thought for a bit, then said, "Of course I have to tell Lin Hao about this. As for how to deal with it, don't beat the grass and scare the snake. I want to find out the group behind her." Cheng Wangxue asked, "But Lin Hao hasn't come back these few days. How are we going to inform him? The next time we deliver food to him?" Lin Feng nodded and said, "Just send the information like usual. I'll send someone to secretly keep an eye on the female nurse." "Okay, don't worry about other things. Leave it to me." Cheng Wangxue nodded to show that she understood. "Okay, I understand." Chapter 1363. The next day, when Lin Hao returned to the office at noon, Lu Meiqing followed him in. "Io, sister-in-law Cheng is here to deliver food to the director again." As soon as she entered, she saw Cheng Wangxue standing in front of Lin Hao's desk. There was another lunchbox on the table. It was probably a new lunch for Lin Hao. Lin Hao nodded when he saw Cheng Wangxue and casually greeted sister-in-law. Then he looked around and asked, "Huh? You didn't bring Xiaolu today? She must have brought her last night." Cheng Wangxue turned to see the two of them come in, then retreated to the side to clean up Lin Hao's lunchbox. As she cleaned up, she replied with a smile, "No, she went to play with her friends today. That's why I didn't bring her." Lin Xiaolu's friends were naturally Tong Tong, Lingling, and Tungting. Lin Hao just remembered that Lingling and Tungting were in High City a few days ago. He hadn't seen Xiaolu for a while. Now that Wu Qingyue brought the two kids over, she naturally had to go play with them. "Oh, I see." Cheng Wangxue smiled and nodded at Lu Meiqing. "Okay, I just got here. If you're not busy now, you can eat while it's hot. I'll go back first." As she spoke, she pushed the lunchbox she had just brought closer to its position. Lin Hao sat in his seat and nodded. He placed the things in his hands on the side of the table and said, "Okay, I got it." Cheng Wangxue took the lunchbox and left. Cheng Wangxue took the lunchbox he had eaten and left the place. "Director, You should at least go back and eat by yourself. Why do you always have to let your family bring it over? Lu Meiqing was still holding the documents in her hand. When she walked towards the filing cabinet, she casually said to Lin Hao. Lin Hao shrugged and reached out to pull the lunchbox that Chang Wangxue had just brought to him. As he opened it, he said, "Do you think I have time? It's so troublesome to come back immediately after going back for a meal. Actually, I already told them that it's okay to eat at the cafeteria, but they just want to bring me food. What can I do?" He didn't feel hungry when he was busy with work, but now that he saw the lunchbox in front of him and smelled the hot food, his stomach immediately protested. "Hungry. I want to eat." It was time to eat. As he opened the lunchbox, he was slightly startled when he saw a certain spot in the box, but his hands didn't stop moving. After smoothly opening the lids, he made an action of sniffing the aroma of the food. But sister-in-law's cooking is indeed better than the chef's in our canteen. It smells so good. After Lu Meiqing put down the files, she turned around and saw that he had already opened his lunchbox to eat. Knowing that he couldn't disturb their director's mealtime, he smiled and said, "That's true. Of course, my own cooking is much better than the cooks in the cafeteria who just want to deal with it. Sigh, but for me, no matter how bad the food in the cafeteria is, as long as it can fill my stomach, it's fine." After all, she was just an ordinary person. If it wasn't for the fact that she had a job in the medical center, she wouldn't have survived. She didn't know where her next meal would come from after she ate her last one. With that, she also left Lin Hao's office. After watching her go out and help close the door, Lin Hao then took out the food box on the top. Looking at the bottom layer of rice, he took out the bottom layer of rice and put it aside. Only then did he see the piece of paper at the bottom, which was for him. After he opened the lunchbox just now, he saw a small red dot on the side of the lunchbox. This dot usually didn't appear, and it only appeared when a message was sent. And its appearance meant that this was a message that needed to be kept secret. So he deliberately pretended to eat, so that Lu Meiqing would realize that he needed a private space to eat. Sure enough, Lu Meiqing tactfully went out. Only then did Lin Hao feel at ease to read the secret message that Chang Wangxue brought him. Taking out the note and opening it, Lin Shi raised his eyebrows. His expression didn't change much, but he meaningfully glanced outside the door. Looking at the note, he was reminded to make sure that Lin Xiao's identity information was kept secret. Don't let people deliberately come in and search for this information. Then things would be over. Lin Hao wasn't surprised by this. After all, Lin Xiao was the leader of a base, and it was normal for many people to want to know her secrets. In particular, her body had died once. Lin Hao was glad that the 3 people who had seen Lu Tianyu die were no longer in this world. He was also mentally prepared that there were spies in the base. After all, even if this base was small now, there were already 20,000 people, and those who came before were from several other bases. It was normal for some people to be dissatisfied with Lin Xiao, who was now using Lu Tianyu's identity as the leader. So he had been doing a good job of keeping the information of Lin Xiao's previous physical examination in secret. If it weren't for the use of her information for research, he would have burned all the information. But thinking about the group of zombies at the second base, if one day there was another pregnant one, at least there was a case to refer to here. But when he saw that the person who wanted to inquire about his information was Lu Meiqing, who had been working beside him for a few months, Lin Hao just curled his lips. It wasn't that he had long suspected Lu Meiqing, but that he didn't trust anyone at all. Looking at the later part of Lin Feng's instructions, he still needed to find out the team behind Lu Meiqing and told him not to show it. Lin Hao burned the note, and then officially began to eat his meal. Outside, when Lu Meiqing came out of Lin Hao's office, her expression immediately became worried. She walked back to her own duty room and sat down. She frowned and thought about how to find out Lin Hao's secret recently. But Lin Hao's defenses were really too tight. It was as if an invisible shield had appeared around him, hiding all his secrets. She had been circling around him for a few months, but she couldn't find a breakthrough at all. And recently, their organization had begun to become anxious because China had already revealed their secret. In other words, China's secret operation that had been secretly plotting was about to officially begin. At this time, if they still couldn't get any valuable information, then it might be too late. They always felt that the situation would change, so they began to think of other ways to find a breakthrough. Since they couldn't find a breakthrough from Lin Hao himself, then they would find it from the people around him. So recently, every time Cheng Wanxue and Lin Wenwen came over, she would pretend to meet them and say a few words to get familiar with them first. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.